streaming. Everything's looking good on this side. What's our stream health look like on YouTube? We're live. Hey, what's good, everyone? If you're joining in on this particular chat today, I appreciate you. Today I have a special esteemed guest, the legendary Young Guru. What's going on, brother?
Everything is beautiful, man. Chilling. Rainy Saturday.
I know you've had a very busy summer, man, and
A busy year, period. I'm on it like I want to sit on my couch and do nothing but like look at plugins for the next month. I want to do
so
everything from the couch, man.
how do you defrag from something like that, where something is like mission critical and you're working at peak performance for that level, and then you go back to normal? How long does that take you?
It's really about the time difference. So like right now, there's a couple things. Just mentally, like I'll go back into the things I love to do, like actually make beats. You know, like we love to do those things, but then I can't always just sit down and like, oh, I want to make beats. I'm always working on somebody else's project or putting the show together or traveling or whatever. I try to catch up as much as I can on like comic books and things like that that I really love that I haven't been able to read, or regular books that I try to do that. But just I don't know, mentally I'll just come back and like just chill and try to not move. I don't want to really go out and go, party. I've done that for like, people will be like, oh, you don't want to come to this, and I'm like, man, I've been on a roll for literally 6 months, and then even before the roll, I'm in LA recording, so it's like I don't live in LA, but now that Jay is out there, I have to constantly go out there to record. So I haven't been, I basically haven't been in my house for 30 days straight in about 2 years.
Wow. I'm trying to get like you, man. I'm the opposite. I'm in the house too much, but that's dope, man. I know that, I guess the latest thing that has come up was with your work and involvement in the Meek Mill project. I know you've talked about this and other people have brought it up, but one thing I notice about that kind of move is that I would say that's a form of reaching back. Do you interpret it that way?
A couple ways. When you say reaching back, I'll get to the point of where it is reaching back, but I don't want it to sound like I'm doing like some charity.
Right. No disrespect to nobody, right?
On the reaching back part, it is sort of a full circle moment for me, because someone who was my assistant is who is reaching out to me to come mix the project.
Lit.
So it's a big thing for me and I'm so like proud. I have my chest up about like Cruz finally getting his acknowledgement, people knowing his name, him being shouted out on a bunch of podcasts and things like that, just because, Meek is doing the Turn Me Up Cruz thing. So it's a big thing for me. And that's where I think the reaching back goes, where Cruz was like, yo, Goo, I think this is a great like turning point album for Meek. And it could be huge, but we need you to come in and do what you do. So that was Cruz calling me and being like, not only do I need you to mix the records, but I also need your opinion on like what we need to do to the records.
Yeah.
So it was sort of he had a bunch of records done, like just, I heard a good 50, like a bunch of records done. So then it was a thing of them bringing me in and going, okay, here's the core of what we know we're going to keep. Mm-hmm. But it ended up being 19 songs. So obviously, certain things were added, or we talked about which songs should we use, why, where the focus should be. But my main thing was coming in and enhancing the songs, and what, we normally call overdubs, or certain songs needed things taken away. Certain songs needed things added, certain, just figuring out who we're going to get to do that. So that's why I think it wasn't necessarily a charity thing too, because me mixing Meek keeps me young. It keeps me calm. Yeah. It allows me to the things that I've been studying for the past 2 years, it allows me to demonstrate those. And I think, that was one of the dopest things about the response that I've been getting, is that people, the first thing they say is like, Goo, this is like out of the box for you. It sounds like a different you. It's applying, different things. And I think that's the turnaround moment, or the thing that I like to see more than anything else, besides the fact of, the obvious things of Meek and where he's at in his career. I wouldn't call it like a rebranding. It's more of a comeback story.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
It is. It really is.
People have said, oh, the rebranding. And I'm like, he's still the same. Rebranding to me is like what Madonna does. Like every time I flip, I'm a different person. That's rebranding. Or someone who's like a D Nice that goes from I'm a rapper and now I'm a famous DJ. That's a rebranding.
Right.
Comebacks are like, oh, I was down. You got to remember, this guy was in jail. So it's just like, to come out, to go through the battle with Drake, like all those things and other things that people don't realize. Like you see me putting up these posts about like, oh, so-and-so just passed. And so, but these are like real losses.
Yeah.
So like for him to have the win, I think the title is perfect. Like championships, it's absolutely perfect. So that's like the feel. I don't know if it was like a necessary. We benefit off of it. Both of us benefit off of this. It's where we are supposed to be as OGs of saying, okay, let's usher in or help the next generation.
Yes.
And Meek being at a point where now he's not even the younger generation. He's at his like young OG stage, right? Like he's getting to that stage. So it's just that helping people grow and just like trying to, put out good music and do the things that I hear people complain about, where it's just like, okay, in trying to be the solution and not just complain, it's like, let's try to balance this album as much as possible. So there's the turn up stuff. You're gonna have your Cardi B's, you're gonna have your Future, but we also have the sample joints that people are like, oh, I miss the flavor of hip hop.
Yes.
But it also can't be 1993 again. Right. So what me and my 45-year-old friends are gonna love, a younger kid may not know, but if you this thing of like, okay, let's take some older and I think you made a great point, in one of your other presentations where you were just like, yo, you could literally take all the samples from these incredible runs and these kids wouldn't know what it is. It's just the, creatively, how do you flip it, or, how do you add the up-to-date drums, or what do you add to the songs that will, I don't know, somehow bring it into a different light. I don't, just something different. The tools are different, so we could do so much more stuff. Like I couldn't do the end of What's Free on Jay's verse, all that stuff, if I didn't have stutter edit, if I didn't have, all these filters, if I didn't have, stuff that I learned about from you, like Cable Guy stuff, all of those things. It was a little bit of a nuisance, because I'm so used to working at Ableton in my production, that I didn't realize that, the Cable Guy's joints are not AAX. So it's just like, go back into Ableton, do what I was going to do, bring it back in. My production partner, Volley, who we have a group together, he was in there. So he was helping me. Like, he's super good with all the MIDI stuff in Pro Tools. Whereas, like, I'm still getting my, like, things that I do naturally in Ableton.
Yeah.
I'm just like, okay, I got to figure out how to do this quicker in Pro Tools. So, like, a lot of the stutter edit stuff was, like, him seeing me in exhaustion points and being like, okay, let me mess with the vocal. Well, I would call him, like, the studio I was using was close to his house. So it was just like, yo, come through, mess with this for like a good hour. I'm going to take a, coffee break or go sleep. And then he'd have like 8, 9, stereo tracks of just different effects. And we would sit there and just be like, okay, let's use this one. Let's use this. Let's use it, and put it together. And there's a lot of stuff that like I would do creatively and put on there and then present it to Meek, and Meek might go, oh, nah, take that off. So, it's a back and forth, like same kind of like stutter edits that I have at the end of the Cardi B record. I had all throughout her verse. But then Meek was like, nah, take that off. So it's their project. So I'm always like, okay, but at least I showed you the sauce.
Right.
And you were like, I don't like that taste, take that out. So that's how we kind of worked back and forth. And then he trusted me with, once he heard what the records sound like fully embellished, he really trusted me to go in with other records.
That's a very important question I have for you, maybe as a beat maker, right? Mm-hmm. How much, I guess from your perspective, because you'll receive the records and you'll get a chance to mute vocals versus records, right? How much do you think beat makers should worry about, not necessarily mixing, but how much sauce should we be putting into a record that if we're in trying to get it to another artist? So there's a difference between me making the beats and upload it to my SoundCloud so you can listen and experience it. But then is that presentation, should it be different for like, well, I'm definitely going to send it to this artist and they're going to do their thing. Is there a difference in levels, or is there a difference in how much sauce? Like, do you need to reverse reverbs and everything like that before artist gets onto it?
Here's my point, and I'm glad you asked that question, because it allows me to talk about levels and two different things. So I'm one of the biggest people that hates how squashed everyone's music and beats sound. The beats sound really squashed, and there's not a lot of dynamic range. And please understand that this is not the old guy going, "Oh, you're not doing it right." Da, da, da. I teach students. I understand when you're trying to get placements. So what I say is make it as loud but sound great on the presentation end. When you're sending off beats for people, to try to get placements, yes, you can put your limiters on there, embellish it as much as you want. Like the better the beat, like present it as a fully done thing. So if you're talking about reverse reverbs, produce the hell out of it, okay, right? And present the beat. Now, where I have a problem is once said beat is sold, then you should go back. It is your job as a producer to present me, the mixer, with the best quality of things to mix.
Right.
So here's where the real world problem comes in. And we'll go through the whole scenario. You sit at home, you make the beat, you have limiters and all these things to make it extremely loud, right? And then do that beat 3 months from now, a year from now, 2 years from now. Some artist says, "I like that beat." You're like, "Oh my God, I sold the beat." You know what I mean? Great. And if it's a major artist, you're like, "Oh, this is my chance," right? Said producer then just goes back and goes bounce all tracks.
Right.
I get a kick that is it's literally hitting the red. Yeah. I get a snare literally hitting the red. I get a hi-hat literally hitting the red. I have no headroom to do anything to the whole thing, right? So the whole point is now once you sold the beat, go back and make sure that everything is at a level where if people don't understand leveling, it's something that you should really get into, and it's really negative that people don't understand what VU meters are because we've left the analog world versus what a PPM is versus what LUFS, however you pronounce. Everybody pronounces that different. Lust.
Yeah, lust.
Everybody pronounces it different. Right? But what we're talking about is a general overall level with streaming now, right? But all of these are different things, and I think that people have confused the word mixing and mastering. They start to put those two words together. Yeah. Like, can you mix and master my thing? And I'm like, these are two completely different things. Disciplines, yeah. But the reason that has happened is because we've left sort of the album format. So mixing was one stage, mastering was another stage, and a lot of people now just think mastering is making it as loud as possible. Yeah. That was one aspect of mastering. It's also me as a person who's over a Jay-Z album, right? And if you take, for instance, when you see me doing the mastering of the Black album on Fade to Black, I'm literally taking songs that have been mixed by 4 or 5 different engineers. So it's not only my job to make them all level-wise the same, but EQ-wise to make them all match as an album. Right. So there was a lot of other things other than just let me maximize the loudness of what this is. And then it got to a point where those two things got misconstrued because now we're at a point where people are just uploading one song. So there's not really another song to compare it to in terms of EQing. Yeah. If you get the gist of it, this is where the mystery came in or where the mistake comes in. So to get to my point, to answer your question, I'm trying to get people to understand what 0VU really meant and why that was selected and what that represented. It was us in analog world going, okay, there's a certain amount of noise that is the floor. No matter what, tape is going to have noise in it. It's a physical thing. So 0VU was where we could go, okay, here's where the signal is loud enough to mask. It was the perfect point. It was like, here's where the signal's loud enough to mask the floor, but not distort. And then you gave yourself a little space and you had the +3. So people started understanding, and I'm preaching to the choir, but in an analog world, you can sort of distort on purpose, and certain things start to happen because it is analog. You start to get certain harmonics. Things start to ring in a certain way that we as human beings found pleasurable. Right? So it's weird to me that when if people don't understand that when I'm literally hitting 0VU in the analog world, in the digital world, inside of my Pro Tools, Ableton, or whatever else you're talking about, depending on the bit rate, right? Now, it depends on if you're 16-bit, 24-bit, whatever, but depending on the bit rate, that same 0VU is going to equal out to about like a -18 or a -20.
Yeah.
And people are literally recording where they're like all the way at the top. And I'm like, that's like if you walked into a mix when I was working on tape and you just saw all the meters on the VU meter just sitting at +3.
And not moving.
You would fire me. You know, you're like, you would fire me. You'd be like, why are you recording like this? But then I also get these arguments of, Goo, you know, we're in a digital world now, you know, we can handle that, da, 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 da. I want it to be louder. And I think people don't know the distinction between amplitude and volume.
Correct.
Those are two completely different concepts. And my ultimate argument when it gets to that, of what level people should be at, is all of your major plugins are operating at -18 anyway. Anyway. So in order for you, this is a huge point. In order for you to get out of the plugin what it was really designed to do, you should be hitting that plugin as an input signal of -18. Now, are there some exceptions? Yes. There are some, like when I hit UA to ask them exactly what different ones, they just sent me the ones that were different and like, okay, this is why, because the Neve compressor actually in the real world allow you to change that. So they're emulating to the T exactly what, so there's certain ones that are different, but as a general rule, most plugins are -18 internal working levels.
Can you harm that by going too low?
No, you won't harm it by going too low. And that's the thing in the digital world. In the digital world itself, there is no floor noise. Like there's you know what I mean? The medium of what we're recording on doesn't have floor noise. So you can be a little lower. But my point is once you, this is what I mean in terms of recording. But the recording engineer in hip hop has sort of been taken out of the process of the music. We record vocals, but I'm put into a situation plenty of times where I'm dealing with source material that has never been recorded, if you understand what I mean. I'm being given this by a producer who may not understand levels. So again, when you have a discussion and you say to me, oh, okay, well, the Chronic 2001, you know, I was listening and you were like, this is the most amazing sounding thing. I'm like, yeah, because Dr. Dre controlled the whole process. So out of his MPC 3000, which was, you know, a certain color, right? And we can even start all the way back at the beginning. He's sampling off of certain vinyl, that's a color. Whatever mixer you use to get into the Beat Machine is another color. The Beat Machine itself, and we know Dr. Dre loves that 3000. So that is a color in and of itself, and probably one of the best colors ever of the MPC series, is my personal favorite. Then that's going to a board. So each one of those sounds is hitting a preamp on an SSL. It's hitting an SSL 4000 preamp. He'll then walk over in the tracking process and start EQing the snare, EQing the drums, EQing everything else. Then once I have it a way that I like it, then we record it to tape. Now, when I'm mixing, do you understand? He's controlling all of these points versus when people nowadays are giving me an 808 that is just distorted and it's kicking all the way and it's hitting the red. The only thing I can do is clip gain it down.
Right.
And it's still distorted and it's still not moving and it's still just nasty. So a lot of times I'll call producers and I'll be like, yo, I understand. Look, you've sold the beat. Can you please give me the 808 without any processing on it? I can trust that I can make it sound better than if you want it to sound. Once I have the pure source, I can then get into textures and say, okay, if you want it to be nasty and that's the color that would look, I can get it there, but I can't undo it once it's already on there. Right. And that's the biggest thing. Clipping is the only thing I can't really fix. It's one of the weirdest things of why people still don't like levels are a huge thing for me. This is how I explain it to my students, and people think that because it's loud that it's going to hit hard. And it doesn't. It's just perceived loudness. A speaker itself is a transducer, right? Yeah. And I don't like to use words without, you know, I'm not assuming everybody understands. So I'm going to explain. A transducer is simple. It changes one form of energy into another form of energy. It's not that deep. A microphone is a transducer, right? You take an acoustic energy, you make an electrical energy, which is then goes through an A to D converter and gets converted to your computer. Simple. Here's the point. When you are in an analog world, you are asking your speaker to push air. This is how science works. the speaker pushes air, that air hits your ear, and the harder that it's pushing, the louder it seems, right? When you compress and squeeze everything into this little thing, it's almost like trying to punch somebody like this. Mm-hmm. It's never, you can't hit, if I can only move this much, I can't really punch you. But if I have enough space to move back and do this,
dynamic,
it's gonna hit harder. You're squeezing everything, so you're punching like this, and that's how your kick, it sounds to me, when it could really give itself the space to move back and really punch.
Nice.
So it may seem louder to you at the given moment, but in a club situation, it's not going to stand up to a record that has a lot of breadth and depth to it. It's going to cause the DJ to kind of like turn everything up, and then that's where you get this expression that you've expressed, to where it's like certain music, all it is just hearing the 808 and the vocal. And that's why then you have this trend of the vocals having to be so loud that it loses some of the musicality of what's going on in the record. So, I mean, that's one of the biggest things for me is level, and people, I wish producers would understand that. So my point being is like, keep everything while you're inside of your mix, keep everything that way, but that's what your master bus is for, right? Put a limiter, we have incredible tools, all these multi-band, put all that on the master, right? But don't record so loud that the 808 itself is like in the red and I can't do anything with that. Make it loud on the master. Don't make it loud in the actual mix. Your stereo bus is the most precious place. Like, that place is where everything gets glued together. And I don't care how many, times you sent things to auxes and how many, we all have our ways that we figured out now of like quick ways of doing things. So now I figured out, like, if I bust a bunch of, it's not really just to be busting a bunch of things. I do everything with purpose. So my main reason for doing that is so I can print all my stems and all my passes in one thing.
Gotcha.
So I had to get to a point of like I was so hype about offline bouncing that I was just like, oh, okay, look, I'm on an offline, this is so much quicker. But I find it now faster if I have to do very detailed stems, and I have to do a main, a cleaner, instrumental, a cappella, all of those things. I can now listen down for 5 minutes, and I have all of the way I have my routing done, my mix sessions, and then I have all those things at one time.
Wow. Yeah. I think because of the way I came up, I've only used offline bouncing, to be honest with you. Because Fruity Loops was one of the first to, like, you do offline bounce, or you can split up your mixer tracks and individual tracks. So I never had to learn how to loop and set up buses and print stems and things. So I find that very interesting. I want to try it out, but I don't want it to be a vanity project.
Well, it's a necessity in my world, in terms of you won't get your back end from a major company until you hand in all of these passes. So, that's a real thing. It's a very good thing. So, and then for the artists, they also need stems now of all the songs. And I'm one of those persons that does very detailed stems, like super deep. Like, some people just do drums, some people just do bass, some people I do a stem for every single sound that is in my session. Unless it's like, if the producer did like 4 kicks and they're doing the same pattern, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's layered on top of each other, then yes, that becomes the kick, right? But I don't do it because in my world where I'm playing, where my stems have to be then transferred to play with the band, I may at any moment say, take the kick out, take the snare out. Oh, take everything out, but on to the next one, he can't really replace this sample sound. So then this is going to stay in, the click is going to stay. Like, I have to be able to separate every single thing at the drop of a hat. Sometimes it may be, we're just doing a festival and we're scaling back to a 3-man thing where it's just me, it's just Omar, who's our keyboard player, and it's just Boots, who's our drummer, right? And it's just, so there's going to be more things in my Ableton session. I use Ableton to do live performances. So there's going to be more things in my Ableton session than normal. But I have the ability, I have just a super session set up where I just have, just all of my stems across, and I can just press one button, play the whole song, but I have certain things muted that don't belong. I can also send SMPTE to the lighting guys, Blackburst to the lighting guys. I can send a click to the band. I can send MIDI anywhere. It just allows me to do everything, so that before we were just using a regular, when I say before, like early 90s, right? we were just using a regular playback machine, which was just like load your songs in here, press play. There was no fast forward. There was no stop. There was no separate. This allows me to go into every venue and send the front of house guy, separated stems where he can then get into mixing in the nook and the cranny of that particular room. Or something like making it ring out in that room, he can then use the tools that we have to take out certain things in just that instrument or just that vocal or sample versus having to do that with the whole 2-track.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Wow.
So that's a reason why my mix world has to be that way, where I'm delivering stems, but I'm also delivering different versions. And then sometimes doing specialty versions where, say, if there's a guest feature, I'm thinking about, okay, if the guest feature comes, it has to be this way. Let's say he has to do a TV show and the guest feature person isn't there. I'm going to do a version where their stuff is in it, but his lead vocal, there may be specialty versions that you have to do. Just, I forward think all these things so that the artist is not calling me, the day of the Jimmy Fallon show saying, can you make this version of the, I've kind of thought that out.
And you never want to say you can't.
Right, exactly. No, you can, there is no can't, but that's part of the job. And that's part of, I think sometimes people don't realize that they do their music for themselves in their own way, but I have clients, so I have to do music for every way possible, or every format possible.
That's a very important, I guess, junction in this conversation, because although I think you're multi-talented and you do everything, but I'm gonna ask you this question as a person on that side of it, right? So when some of our legendary producers criticize the difference between beat maker and producer, is what they're saying coming from the vein of everything you have to consider as a professional or a client, or is that more of a finesse in terms of creativity? Because that's where I kind of get caught up in that argument. It was like, what are you talking about? You made the beat, I make a beat. We're both beat makers, but when we get into the professionalism, I hear it.
Yeah, when somebody's talking about the difference between a beat maker and a producer, it's saying, okay, a beat maker just makes the beat.
Yeah.
And we all aspire to be producers, right?
Yeah.
What the difference is that once you've made that beat, that's half of the song. It's actually not even the song.
Right.
It's just half. So what's the vocal going to say? Are you producing the vocal? Even if you're not vocal producer, did you come up with the idea? Did you talk to the artist about what are y'all going to say? Did you, when they came with this, this, and this, did you say, no, that's not right? Make a suggestion. Let's do this. Let's move this. Right now, once you've done that, like, did you do, you'll be amazed at how many songs that I get where I'm doing the drops. I was going
to tie it into that. I was like, so in this world, then the engineer is now actually producing.
But this is what I'm saying. So people that don't do that, you're just a beat maker.
Got it.
Right? And what you and okay, yes, there's a back and forth now because of the way that things work. Right? Every beat maker is aspiring to be a producer. You want to be in the room with, but that's not the reality of what is going on right now. People are like, yo, I'm trying to get on. So you're emailing beats to people. You're sending beats out to as many people as possible. You may not physically be able to be in the room when the person's doing the song, right? Because of the fact you emailed it. But you should be pushing for that. You should be pushing to hear the mix before it goes out. You should be pushing to actually be there. I miss the days for a lot of different reasons, right? And I keep trying not to say, because I'm also the guy that absolutely, let me say that first. I'm the guy that absolutely loves where we are in this world, right? Of the amount of tools that we have, the fact that I could sit on my couch and like run stems from my laptop and it goes out as a professional, thing. It's a beautiful thing. My laptop is probably more powerful than most studios' computer, or at least has way more plugins. I don't run that game. So I basically, my laptop has become my world. But there's positive and negatives to everything. The negative part about that is when we were on tape, the mix was the mix day. Like when you were like, okay, I'm paying $2,000 for this day to mix my record. So I would be there, the artist would be there, the A&R would be there, everybody's there. They give me my little 4 or 5 hours to like, okay, let me get in my groove, let me get a sauce. Come stick your finger in the sauce. Do you like the spaghetti sauce a little? Should I add a little bit more salt, a little more, but everybody's there. He goes back in the room. I'm like, yo, give me another little quick half hour to get this together. He's going to play PlayStation, mess with his, all that. I go an hour later, I go, guys, I'm done. They come in, everybody's like, yo, Goo, can you turn the snare up a little bit? The producer's like, Goo, can you make this a little brighter? Can the artist, Goo, inevitably going, can you turn me up? Can you set me in the pocket? Okay, now that's another hour that passed. Now, everybody happy? Cool, go. That was the song. That was the song. Everybody was there. So now we're in a world where, number one, nobody's in the same room together. And I love that about the Meek thing, was that we were all in the same space together. He had one room upstairs. I had another room downstairs. It was a back and forth thing while we were in New York, and when we were in California, he had one space, I had another, like back and forth. We were all in the same space. So I can easily walk out the room, go, do you like this? Yes, no. Do you like this thing? When you're emailing back and forth, can end up being days.
Yeah.
It's just like, yo, here, I sent it to the A&R. He don't like something. I sent it to the producer. He don't like something. I sent it to the artist. He don't like something. The producer done now changed something. Now the artist is like, why you let him change that? And all this conversation could have been going on
if everyone's in the same box.
Right. Or treat it that way. Yeah. We still have the same tools. The same way me and you are in different places, but we talking. This is your music. This is your mix.
Yeah.
This is the mix of your song that's going to go out. It should be that important. So even if you're not in a physical place, take the time to go, okay, the mix is going on today. I want to put input into it. I love to have, I call producers. I try as much as I can to include, because I know the artists and the labels don't always do that, where it's just like, yo, hey, by the way, I'm mixing your record today. You may want to stop, want to stop by. Or I went through that process of doing things to records where people who are outside of the music making process don't call the producer, and that always pissed me off. Right? So I was like, always wanted to make sure that people were involved. But that's just like where we are nowadays. Yeah. So that, and then the fact that the other people know that you can change anything at the drop of a hat. So sometimes the record is never done. So where I'm happy with it, they're cool with it. We've been riding around, you've been riding around to it, you've been doing whatever, and then now you want to change everything. And it's just like, sometimes the changes, if they're musical changes that make the record better, I'm with it. If they're changes that are like, we have to fit into a radio format, so we need to figure out how to edit this down to, but no, we don't. If the person, if they love the song, if there's 15 or more or less seconds, it's not going to make this a hit.
Not
right?
Anymore,
the radio
right.
person will turn this down, they'll fade it out, whatever. Like, but don't make me change a record because it's like, oh, you in your mind have this old paradigm that radio records are 3 minutes and 30 seconds.
Yeah.
Those sort of things. But it sounds silly, but it gets into real creative things when you have a lot of people involved.
Yeah, it does. I know I can foresee that. I see what you're talking about. I noticed that with like just with like, I don't know if you guys use it no more, but you're familiar with like Red Book spec?
Yes.
Like you don't see that term as much anymore, but I remember I used to talk to older people who live by it. And I guess that's kind of where we got this conversation from, what you're talking about with everyone squashing dynamics because they don't understand that book. But
well, here's the thing. I'm glad you brought that point up too. I'm going on my phone because I love to write things down, and I never front to people like I memorize all this stuff. Einstein said like, never memorize something that you can look up. Right? Hey. It's a quote that is a weird quote that always stuck with me. I'm not the historian. Knife is the historian. He remembers dates and all these things. I'm always like I'm the like screenshot person always in my phone, right? So for me, the biggest thing with what you're talking about is the fact that we have to deal with streaming now, or the fact that the CD as a format is not viable anymore. So what you're talking about with Red Book was the guidelines for making a CD.
Yeah. And
we decided at that point, and obviously I'm stating this, again, I'm preaching to the choir, but I'm saying it for your audience, and I'm gonna get to a point. We decided and said, okay, 44/16 is the perfect thing, or high fidelity. That's what we call high fidelity audio on a CD, right? 16-bit was 44. The sample rate was 44,000, right? 44.1. Because we said, okay, if humans can hear from 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz, you need a little over double that, right? Me and you probably don't hear 20,000 hertz. You're too old. The fibria is called fibria. It's these little hairs in your ear. As you get older, they die off, right? And then you start losing hearing. A child hears way better than an adult because those things haven't died yet. But the human people, 20 hertz to 20,000, that's all we can hear. right? Above that is like dog whistle stuff, like that stuff we can't hear that they can hear. And then you start getting into other microwaves and all those other things, right? Cool. In our digital world, we said we need double this plus a little bit more. So that's, if you doubled it, it would have been the 40, and then they gave you the 44.1. So that's what the sample rate was, right? Cool. Then we started getting into things, and that's another point of when people use this word high fidelity. It really means anything above 4416, right? So that's not a real, we need a better word than that, because you could be at 2444, that's high fidelity. I could then be at 9644, that's high fidelity. I could go all the way up to 96,192. That's, you know, like there needs to be, and the reason why I'm saying this is because now we're getting to a point where we are, which I don't really understand, where people are going, oh, I'm mastering for, we used to say, oh, I'm mastering for iTunes. We have that now in our when we get masters back, right? And this is just a weird world where no one has direct answers. And I've done a lot of research on this, and the things are constantly changing and they're constantly evolving, because I have to teach this to my students. Like I understand that for me personally, I'm constantly doing projects that I'm giving to a mastering guy, and that mastering person is taking care of that. But my son, my students, all of these, they're loading the rest of the world. You want a master so that when you put it on SoundCloud, when you put it on Tidal, when you put it on our streaming services, like that was a joke, guys. No, but I rep Tidal to the fullest. I love Tidal.
Hey.
But when we put it on these different things, we don't know exactly what's happening to the music. So I went out and I like really did a lot of the research about what rate are we streaming at when we go to, and they're all completely different. They're all completely different. And some people are missing the point that if you're above, they're all going to reduce. Here's the reason why, and I'll go, because sometimes when you see streaming services or people doing things that seem backwards and you don't understand the reason why, when you get the explanation, now you'll understand. The whole point of the thing of compression, a compressor as a unit didn't exist until radio needed to say, I can't be responsible for blowing out people's speakers. This song, and this song all have to be at the same level. They're all at different, these artists are giving me different things at different levels. So radio introduced and created the compressor. It does this, make sure everybody's going like at the same level. Now that we're in streaming, they're doing the same thing.
Okay.
I have to take songs from that were mixed in 1950. I'm talking about me as a streaming service, a Motown song, a Bob Marley song, a Cure song, The Clue, Police, all the way to Lil Yachty. And they all have to be in this space. So obviously the song from 1950, or even if you keep it in our vein, the De La Soul song is not going to sound as loud as, you know, the song, the Future song that just came out last week. They're physically, if you physically look at the waveforms, the De La Soul one is this way, and this one is like brick wall. So me as a streaming service, I have to be able to present you this one and this one at the same level, which is why there's these restrictions. So people think they're fooling the system when they come in with these like -8, -9 LUFS, and I'm like, you don't realize that all they're going to do is take your brick wall -8 mix and pull it down to -14.
Wow.
That's all they're going to do.
And then it's going to take all the action out of it.
It's already don't have no action, and then you move it down. Now it's going to sound real low compared to if I have a breathing mix that hits right underneath a -14. So we have enough plugins now where you can see the difference, you know, like in your level. There's a million plugins now that you can put on your master bus to see exactly what I got to learn how to pronounce this, LUFS. What it really is, the FS stands for full scale, right? So that's really what it's doing. It's showing you that exactly where you are on that scale. But to give that point is just like all the streaming services are then going to use a different rate. They all use different rates. So if you look at this, right? If we look at high res, the highest res being like 32-bit, 192, right? A CD is 4416, right? I don't know if you go to, like, let's say play music, and this is the weird thing. A lot of these people, they say that the technology is proprietary. which means we don't know what the technology is. Not them themselves. They're saying this is our own technology that we are not allowing you to get. It's proprietary. It's ours. But I don't know what your technology is doing. You're right? I don't know what that is. Or you have to watch these words when you're reading on their website when it says up to 320 kilo, whatever per second. What is up to? That means that I'm not constantly streaming at a perfect rate. A lot of these places are like, oh, you have to have the package that you have to buy, or you have to be in high fidelity. Or people don't know, like if you say YouTube, right? YouTube is 128 or 384 kbps, right? And it's the AAC version, right? And that's just kilobytes per second, right? But what people don't know, and this is important because YouTube is like 80% of where everybody discovers music. If you don't upload a high definition video, it's never going to play at the 386. It plays at the 128.
Wow.
No matter how good your song has been mixed and whatever, and you upload it as a regular video, it's going to play at the 128. It has to be a YouTube high definition video in order to play at 384.
Wow.
Facts. They don't tell you this. iTunes plays at 256, right? And that's AAC. Amazon is 256 MP3. Spotify is weird because Spotify can be 96, 160, 320, right? And it's not an MP3 or an AAC. It's their own whatever it is. I don't know exactly what that is. And then you can go down the line. I have everybody. Like Rhapsody is 192. XM Satellite, which is weird, is 39 kilobytes per second because they say that their technology is proprietary and that what they do is that they bump it up at the end. I have no idea what that means.
Me neither.
So what they're saying is that they have a technology that when the music gets encoded on their end, it goes and the through point of the traveling is 32. Then when it gets to the other side, to your radio receiver, there's supposed to be something in there that bumps it back. I have no idea what that is, right? And anywhere you see that word, because I like to break down those words to my students, like, well, what does that mean? I'm like, it means that they hired someone to write the code, they own it, and they're not going to tell you what it is.
Got it.
That's what that means. So then, that then leads to the idea of now, do you really understand what's happening when you're streaming your music? It doesn't mean, and I've heard people say, it doesn't mean that you don't mix. You mix to you. I don't want to use street terms, but you always want to start with the purest brick.
Yeah.
You can cut it as many ways as you feel like it, but you always, but if you give me cut and I cut that, it's going to be
problems.
Like that's the whole point. So, or that's another reason why if you look at the playing field, then it goes, okay, let's, and the rollout for Tidal was wrong, right? I'm a realist. Like I hate when people think like they can't tell me what my faults are because that's how I learn. That's how I grow. So the rollout was wrong, but the idea was right. Let's give people high fidelity, right? That should have been the thing. It should have been like, yo, ownership and high fidelity, because the amount of stuff that Tidal has is amazing. This is not a commercial for Tidal, but then that's the thinking behind why, okay, well then let's be able to stream at least 4416, right? Or if you look at the problem solving that we're trying to do, and I'm not saying me, I don't work at Tidal. I'm just saying me as a person, right? At the problem solving that I, as an engineer, like to do in the world, I love to see the results of those. So I think of certain things that I like plugging companies to do, or things that I would love to see, and then I ask for those things, and then or like try to figure out how I can do those things or how I can help to make those things happen. Like I, for the longest time, was like, how come I can't play out of my Serato from a streaming service? Like I, as a DJ, have to still have the physical thing, which gets to the point where I literally have a Dropbox group with my old Howard friends, where every week is just like, yo, here's the new music, here's the new music, here's the new music, here's the new music. It's a way of me keeping up with everything that's going on, because it's impossible for me to sit and listen to every week there's 7 albums coming out. And I'm like, I can't give the attention to all these albums. So it gets to a point where it's just like, I'm being honest, some of the littles, I don't get around to all of their albums. I literally have it. And if somebody walks up to me in the club and is like, can you play something? I have it. So then I'll play it. you know, I'm aware of the obvious singles and the things that, you know, permeate above ground, but to say that I've like sat and listened to every single album top to bottom and absorbed everything that came out in the last, like, it's impossible. You're lying if you say you do that. And then when I catch on to something that I like, I'm listening to it for a while, or I'm studying things, or I'm working on a project where I don't have time to listen to anything. And you know, more things are coming out. So it's just like, that's just the world we live in, you know, today.
I think there's a lot of human capital and curating and things like that because of that.
I said that a long time ago. Maybe probably like 2010. So if you go back to some of those speeches, YouTube speeches, it's like I was using the word filter. I was saying, yo, the human filter is going to become the most valuable thing, because now we're computer guys, and we're people that work in this music industry, or this is something we're interested in, right? Think about the consumer. Think about like my friends who go to work, they have 2.53 kids. You know, I always used to love when the servers used to say 2. I was like, how do you have a 0.5 of a kid? But you know, the averages, right? Like, right? So they have their 2.53 kids. If they're a halfway decent parent, they're like waking up in the morning, getting breakfast together, getting that kid off to school, right? Going to a job, sometimes 2 jobs, right? Or let's just say you work 1, you do an 8-hour day, you come home, you got the, you know, we live in, you know, certain situations. The mom may be there by herself, or the dad may be there, even if the dad is there, and they're both halfway decent parents, right? You've prepared a dinner, you've ate dinner, you got to go over homework. Now you're watching a little bit of the news to know what's going on. They don't have time to be like, yo, let me go through all the latest news. What they're going to do is refer to a filter. They're going to refer to a person that says, yo, here's all the dope stuff you should really listen to this. You should listen to this. You should listen to this. Don't listen to this. This ain't worth your time. The filters are going to become important. You know, like, that's the biggest thing. Where you going? And then certain things you're going to like naturally grab. Naturally, certain things are going to come to you just because of your circle and who you are, and where you go online, right? And you'll see those things. But then, me personally, I still have to search out, which I do actively, for good music, or music that I love. I'm constantly searching for music that's outside of my norm. So I have places that, but it's also two places that I live, like, and I mean online, or like places that I live in my circle, in my circle of influence.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm thinking like remember you're saying how like because that connects to like playlists and things like that. Do you think for beat makers, I've talked a lot about this, about us releasing our own music as whole projects instead of necessarily being 50% of the song, maybe presenting it as 100% in some cases? Because I know a lot of guys that get away with that. I'm trying to frame this the correct way.
Okay.
Do you think that adds value to us? Do you think it's probably more valuable in this generation going into 2020 for beat makers maybe to rebrand as artists?
Yeah, I think that's already been done.
Yeah, well, yeah. But I mean, but no one's ever just said it out loud.
Yes. You should say it out loud. And I think people should think in that manner. With the emergence of beat culture, you know, it blew my mind, you know, when I first started to see it. And I think it took off in the States a little bit earlier on the West Coast with like, you know, those things like Low End Theory popping off. And then like what I consider like the newest generation of that with like Soulection and like things like that, where I went into a room for the first time and watched 2,000 people listen to someone play beats. It blew my mind. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is a culture. Like, this is a whole thing. Like, now the beat maker is the superstar. And, you know, I think that's a beautiful thing for me. So I'm like, okay, yes, people should be releasing their own projects. Or like, imagine if like, you know, Dilla never intended those things that we hear are what he was passing out to like get placements. They weren't intended to be like the way that we view them as albums. Like, we view all of that as albums. You know what I mean? Like, we have all of the donuts before donuts. Like, so yes, you should be presenting your music that way, and also understand how big the world is. You know, like friends of mine, Tall Black Guy, is booked around the world because he makes beats and he plays the beats. So he's doing not only DJing gigs, but he's doing gigs where he's just playing all of his own music. You know, there's plenty of opportunity out there to do, but you have to like be consistent and make a scene for yourself. It's more about the consistency, and then not being upset when you've done it for a year and still realize how many people have never heard of you.
Right.
You know, that's the main thing. Like when Rhapsody like first got her deal, right? When we first signed her, I said that to her. I was like, you realize that there's still a huge section of the population that does not know that you have 8 mixtapes. Like, you have to recognize that and not get upset at that, and keep moving. That's the whole point, is keep moving and be honest with yourself about what you really want and make the move from the honesty point. I think a lot of times people aren't honest. I'm talking about us. When I say us, I'm talking about us, the people that love the culture, that are beat makers, that really love this thing. When I ask them, like, what do you want out of this? And they'll say, oh, no, I just want to be respected. And okay, well, respect don't have nothing to do with money.
Facts. I've been trying to preach that lately. I'm like, it is hard for me to articulate without having that kind of success to come from authority. So I try to paint that picture. Like, listen.
Can I say this too? And then you can answer the question. I want to ask this. I'm also the person that believes that money in and of itself is not an evil thing. I think you should go and plan your life to get as much money as possible. Like, that's not an evil thing. You understand what I'm saying?
Yes.
And especially for people that really love the culture, then you can do some really cultural things. I do things because of the fact that I do certain projects that I'm like, I'm doing this to get my money. This is going to put my daughter through college. My daughter's college, you know, thank God she's graduated already, you know, 22 out in the world doing what she's doing, but her college is $50,000 a year. I can't culture that. I can't be like, yo, like,
can't keep it real through that.
American University, I got the illest, you know, SP 1200 sample. That's not the point. The point is that be honest with yourself and say, yeah, I do want to be the hottest producer in the world. I do want people to recognize who I am. I do want to walk in the club and hear my songs. I do want to have real placement with real artists. And like, then I can help you design your path easier if you're honest with me. But if you come to me with the like, yo, I'm just, you know, I'll give you an example. If I work with MF Doom, I know exactly what he wants. I know what he won't do. I know what his end goal. When this man goes to the degree of wearing them, I don't want fame.
Right.
I want you to listen to my rhymes and say, I got really dope rhymes and really good beats. And I have a very core audience, and I feed them, and I can go on the road whenever I feel like it. And because my audience is I'm not trying to get the Hot 97 audience.
Right.
But it's no problem with doing that. Then it's just different moves that we're going to make. I think sometimes what people don't do is they don't make the extra moves, or we have a problem with going they, them, the man, the system, the company, the this, the that. They won't do this for me. I can't, boom, boom, boom. Okay, well, have you stopped doing that? Aloe Black was one of the main people in my life that just a real short conversation where he was like, go, stop saying they and them and research who the person's name is.
Wow.
It's all listed on the internet. Every company, it's not a they and a them thing. It's a person at that company making a decision on the behalf of the company. That's a dangerous thing that we live in the United States, where the company itself is considered a person. Right. It files taxes and it's considered a person in the United States. Yeah. Like, and people hide behind the legality of that, but it's a person. It does a twofold thing. One, it stops creating a boogeyman. And when you're trying to fight, you can't fight a boogeyman.
It's facts.
That's an idea. You have to realize if somebody's doing something you don't like, and this is not like on some like conspiracy theorist thing. I'm talking about like plug-in companies and things like that. Yeah. Then you'll start to humanize it. You'll start to meet the people. And you'll be like, oh, this person is just a computer nerd like me who ran into doing a company and now has to facilitate this plugin working for thousands of people who don't use it in the way that you use it, who don't use Windows, who don't use Mac, who may use Linux, he got to now think about iOS. This is a kid that just started out, I want to make plugins.
Yeah.
And go into a company. And sometimes we fall into this thing of going they, them, have the conversation. Figure out who the person is, right? On that end, from the plugin company standpoint, and tell them what you want. Tell them how you work. A lot of the things that I think draws me to, like, say, your channel is a lot of the presentation. When I went to a lot of the companies, I was like, a lot of the presentation is not the way I work. It's all house music.
Yeah.
I get it. That's 85% of your world. 90% of every club in the world,
it's house
right?
music.
It's playing house music or a club, whatever you want to call it. You know, some form of electronic dance music. I don't hate all these terms. But the point being is that we needed to start seeing, okay, well, how do you use this in the hip hop world? How do you use this in the reggae world? How do you use this in the reggaeton world? How do you use this in jazz? How do you use this in gospel? Everything is so like just four to the floor dance, all the examples. So it's like, start saying those things. Start saying, this is how we use it. This is what I would like to see. And you'll start seeing a better result than just being mad. Or understand that certain companies are just two people.
Yeah, those are facts.
Just two people.
Yeah,
two people. So the other day, I was trying to look for the 950 emulation because I always used it in Ableton, and I needed to get the AAX version. And I saw, okay, when I first bought it, there was no AAX version. Then they came up with an update, but I was on the road while that happened, and I might have missed the email. So I was like, I went on their website and I was like, there's no place to actually download this. Like, why is it this way? But I have more patience because I'm like, this is two people.
It's two guys, yeah.
Two guys. So then I'm like reaching out to all my people that I know that have it. I reached out to you, I reached out to a couple people, and I was just like, yo, where's the AAX version of this? Because I bought it and I want it. You know what I mean? Blah, blah, blah. But then I went to my emails and I was like, let me just put in RX9. And you guys had sent me an email while I was on the road that said, hey, Goo, here's the AAX version. My point being is that me knowing that it's only two, if this was a regular just company where I'm just like, yo, y'all are whack. Where's my AAX version? How come it's not so easy on the website? There's all the things we say.
Yeah. So
it kind of like, and it works in reverse. When I know it's a big company who has a lot of tech support, who has a lot of, then I'm on where I'm just like, yo, I paid for this. I don't like this type of customer. So I shouldn't have to go, yo, I'm Young Goo. No. What about my student? My student that paid for should get the same customer service that I got.
Yeah.
Not just because I'm me. Those things are like things that you start to understand. And then I also break down record companies the same way, all the services the same. I stopped going they, them, the man, and go, who runs this?
Right.
Okay, this person used to be here, now they're over here. Not only from the standpoint of criticizing them, but to have a conversation and to understand how many of the beat makers of the world have actually, when people used to take their demo and come to New York City and sit in front of Def Jam,
yeah,
to go, okay, I'm trying to get my music heard. There's a circuit that people from all, I watched it for years, people from all over the world will come to New York and just run around to all the labels and sit outside and try to pass this is before the internet, right? Pass their demo off. How many people in this world have done that legwork for today? If Tuma runs this section of this, try to buy that man a drink and have a conversation with him. What's wrong with that?
Right.
So then you understand why there's certain players or why he is going to be more apt to put this person on a playlist and this person on a playlist and that person on a playlist. When you're just Joe Smo and he's getting hit with a million, literally a million of those a day. What makes you anymore? You'll lose the thing of, oh, they hating. They only doing this. No, you know how the system works. You know exactly. So then you become less mad at the system.
Correct. You empower yourself by not blaming the boogeyman.
Yes. Or you can say to yourself, this is the part of the system. Neo can do anything he wants to do in the Matrix. But he has to go into the Matrix in order to touch the rest of the people that are still in the Matrix.
Yes.
He cares about them. You understand what I mean?
I do.
I'm trying to relate that to like the music business, to where a lot of people get upset when if you really love that thing, you'll go through actually finding out how you can touch people and not get upset and create these boogeymen, and then you won't see it as that thing. And then you'll also understand when you see bullshit. Excuse my French. You know what I mean? You'll be able to understand that, because there's so many people that dupe people about like, oh, pay me this to perform, and I'll put you in front of this person, or pay me this to pass your thing off to this person, or pay me this to do. And I'm like, word, y'all. And you just get rain made. Oh, and I hate people to see people getting rain made. And there's a difference in like somebody taking your money and actually doing something, or somebody just. What I mean by rain, that's a Wire term, like from The Wire. It was when Stringer was trying to get permits to put up his buildings, and the senator was taking his money. Mm-hmm. And was basically like robbing him, you know what I'm saying? And giving him a little pit. So he goes to talk to his lawyer, and his lawyer's just like, yo, he's laughing because he's like, yo, he rain made you. He's like, he didn't rain made. I just got this contract. He's like, yeah, a $50,000 contract off $250,000 you gave him. He's like, nah, he got Chunky Coats. He just got all these. He said, yo, Chunky Coats gets his permits the same way everybody else does. He fills out his stuff. He makes sure it's to spec, and he prays like hell. That's it. So when you see all these little like independent people that are like, oh, I can get you this, and I can get you in front of radio promotion, and get your beats in front of really research what that person is doing. Yeah. Because rainmaking is more than just it's when it doesn't work, they're going to find another reason for you to pay to keep going. Okay, this is why it didn't work. They're going to put the onus on you. This is why it didn't work, but you got to pay me again. And then when it does work, they're going to take credit for it as if your beat wasn't the thing that made it work.
Right.
It wasn't them. It was you. You understand what I mean? Yeah. Like those are the things that I want to change or see, that I think that once people have a full understanding of like what the reality of the situation is, they won't be as mad and they won't fall for as many tricks, and you'll see that it's a beautiful time. Like, yes. I didn't have an option of bowing down to the record label. I had to. And I'm talking about, this is when I was a kid and what my dream was. Like, you literally ran to an A&R to be like, yo, please, 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 please. You don't have to do that nowadays. You don't have to sign. There are advantages to signing to a major, you know what I mean? But there are advantages to being independent. Once you know what both of those are, then you can make proper decisions. And there's also now, you don't have to fall into people's definitions. You can write your own rules. So this is like when people were having the argument about, is Chance really signed if he goes with iTunes? Yeah. He made his own business mind. It don't matter. Call it what you will.
Right.
The boy's smart. And the man is smart. I'm not, he's younger than me, but I love him. I love what he did in terms of, I'm creating up my own industry. I understand the value of not selling my music. You can't buy my music. Right? I made them change the rule to include streaming in the awards because I'm that popping. So we realize our old paradigm doesn't work anymore. The same way Billboard, that's the line from What's Free. It's like, you got to realize that the old stuff this ain't accurate no more.
Right. It doesn't line up with the way we consume or anything. Yeah.
It doesn't, but we still worship that thing. We want that thing still holds something for us, where we're like, have a #1 Billboard charting thing. So it's like, adjust the chart so that the person can still have a #1 charting thing. Yeah. It doesn't. What does that mean anymore? It's the same thing as just like radio. Like, what does that mean anymore? At the same time, I want people to find the balance. Don't disrespect radio just because the internet is there and say, oh, radio doesn't matter anymore. Remember those funnels that we were talking about? When you can funnel millions of listeners at one point, people still turn on. I'm in the New York, New Jersey area, so I can turn on Hot 97. I can turn on 105.1. These are funneling millions of people. Don't disrespect. But at the same time, I don't need you in order to get my song heard.
Right.
I can put my song up myself now. And now the kids from Brooklyn are coming to you radio and going, yo, y'all don't realize this Bobby Shmurda record is working over here?
Right.
How come y'all have to play this? It works that way now too. You know what I mean? Like, so it's being balanced and not being so mad to be like, oh, I'm never going to be on radio. Yeah, you can be on radio. You may not be on primetime radio. Yes. Is there a game? It's not even a game. It's business. If I'm a major label, the one thing I don't like is people make up so much dumb stuff. There's no such thing as payola, like a systematic payola. There's no such thing as that. Have there been guys at a time that'll walk up to a DJ in a club and be like, yo, here's $100, throw my record? Yes, that type of thing. Yeah. People do that to me all the time, and I give the money back, and I'll be like, I'll play your record. You know what I'm saying? Like, no. If you're willing to do that, I'll play your record just so you can see what the response of the people is.
Right.
I mean, on an overall scale, here's where the money comes in, and to why people think there's a payola thing in radio. That radio makes its money through ads. Mm-hmm. Period. Radio makes its money through ads. People buy commercials. That's how it works, right? Period. Then traditionally, what people would do was hire outside or independent promoters because they didn't want, it was too sticky to have your promotional department that close to the radio station. So you would hire independent promoter. That's where the money game comes in, right? Of paying this specific person. But there would be certain results that you would get. And if I'm a program director or if I'm a radio station or whatever, and I get a constant stream of things from this 5 group of people, I'm going to pay attention to those group of people.
Yeah, these group
of people are supplying me. This is why artists go and do the summer jams for free, right? You want to be in great, and yes, me as a person, I would like to be in good graces with you. But it got to a point where we were scared of. We didn't want to offend. If I did interview for so-and-so, I had to do interview for so-and-so. That's not the time no more.
Got it.
So at the same time that I'm trying to give you the balance of how important radio is, I'm also giving you the balance of plenty of artists. Drake, no interview. I'm my own media.
Right.
I'm at that point now where I'm my own media, right? I don't need you. I can flourish, I'm the biggest thing smoking. I do not need you. You need me.
Right.
You know, this is the power that now people have because you have outlet. Before we didn't have the outlet. We had to play that game. Now you don't have to play that game.
It's beautiful. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm trying to demystify that thing of like when people are just like, they automatically go, it's such a big thing. I can't get my song on the radio and I have to do the payola thing. I was like, yo, if that's the case, then all the rich people would have #1 records. That means I could just pay and 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 make a #1 record. Right. But if I recognize that this Cardi B record is taking off, then yes, I can start to do everything in my power as a company to support the record and make sure that record goes to #1. I'm going to start doing call outs. I'm going to start doing bumper stickers. I'm going to start taking out ads. I'm going to start doing all these things to make sure I've recognized that my return on investment for the money that I put in, I feel like I'm going to get more money back. That's all it is. That's all every record company does, is they gauge, they bet, and they go, okay, this person, I don't know. You know, let's get them a budget of like 300,000. You know what I'm saying? Let's see where it goes. Let's build them up. You know what I mean? That's when you hear people that are like, oh, this person signed for $10 million. They didn't put $10 million in their pocket. The company feels as though you're hot enough for me to give you a budget of $10 million. That means that you can go out and do what you need to do in order to promote that record.
Right, up to $10 million.
Those are the things that when you put money behind it, that's what it does. So I think that's some of the difference that people don't recognize of like, I preach independence all the time and I love independence, but you cannot do homeboy business being independent. There's too much for you to do and it's too difficult. And I think people don't realize as a creative how important day-to-day business is. So people that aren't as talented as you, that will outwork you and have better business than you, will be further than you. And they'll also be richer than you off of a smaller amount of things because their business was together.
Price law. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Those are some of the things that when a lot of my students and my guys that are around are like, why is this person successful? I'm better than them. And I'm like, your talent level has nothing to do. It does have something to do with it, yes. But this person outworks you. You think in the NBA, that's the best basketball players on the planet? No. But there's a guy on West 4th who could beat everybody in the NBA, but he can't handle the groupies. He can't handle not drinking. He can't show up on time. He can't deal with the coach. He can't learn how to go from a system where he was the man to now being a supporting role. Or the coach that he had coached one way, and now he's dealing with a coach that coaches a different way. It's all these reasons why talent is not the work is what gets you there. Like the talent is one thing. So it's just like, am I saying don't be talented? Yes, you study your talent to the nth degree. I constantly study my talent, but I'm studying my talent to use it in a particular thing. So I make moves so that I can use my talent.
Right, that's finding outlets for it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the biggest thing. Or just not complaining about what's wrong with me. It's an analyzation of it should be an analyzation of what am I not doing versus like that person isn't as good as me.
Right. It's almost similar to what you were saying about the boogeyman. So you're not even going to do that with other creative or people in your field. You're like, you're not looking for this mystery that's in this person, like this magical thing that they have that you don't have. You're now putting more emphasis on your work ethic, and you're putting more emphasis on, basically, I call it problem solving. Like you're not going to solve a problem in someone else. You've solved the problems in front of you.
Yes, and that's the way I've always looked at it. But I had certain realizations that I had to do, like when I'm 6'5", I'm skinny. I play basketball really well. I had a bunch of scholarships from high school to go to college, and I turned them all down to do music. I was very focused on what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And once I made that decision, I started making moves that would allow me to get to that position. Some of the things, and that's like some of the people are like, oh, well, I live in such and such a place, and I don't know. Look, first of all, you have a huge advantage over me because you have the internet. I had to physically leave Delaware, get up, go to DC, go to a place where I can congregate around where something in the music business is happening. I was blessed enough to go to Howard at a time where it was just, there'll never be another place like that, like early 90s Howard, right? That magic of like Shy being on my campus, Indiggable Planets being on my campus, and Puffy not being Puffy yet, and he's starting out, all the way to like a Tracy Lee who was my crew. Just imagine being in class and like getting a deal, and you put out singles and they become something. We didn't have the biggest career, but it's like we made the hurdle of getting signed, right? All of these people, my Blacks in the Arts teacher was the guy who played Elijah Muhammad in the Malcolm X movie. It was just so dynamic, and there'll never be another thing like that. But it showed me that I had to go somewhere in order to be around this type of energy. And then also understanding, like, I'm in DC and I'm feeling like I'm going like this. Like, I had a lot of success as a DJ, and I got very comfortable. And when I get comfortable, something inside of me goes, how I'm just moving like this, and I want to be moving like this. So if I'm super comfortable, something's wrong. There's no challenge. There's no next challenge. And that's the thing about like finding happiness in what you do. Like, I'm super blessed. I realize how green my grass is, right? And I mean in terms of like, I grew up in the hood, but I grew up with a father. My father was the father to everybody, right? And he was the guy that picked us up in like the van and took everybody to basketball. This is. I'm giving you this so you can understand my mentality, my character. But I'm saying all that to say, like, I had a father early on that was like, this is the key to happiness. Like, if you had all the money in the world, what would you wake up and do every day? And I was like, I'd probably be digging for records, making beats, like trying to find somebody to rap over these beats and wanting to do that. You know what I mean? Like, that's probably what it's like. All right, so figure out a way to get paid to do that. Wow. That's the key to happiness. It's just like, what do you want to do? Then you figure it out. Then you go, and then once you get to a certain point of where, like, what I'm about to say is going to sound crazy, and this is not from a braggadocious standpoint. I'm beyond the point of trying to obtain things, and I'm trying to achieve things.
Okay, I understand.
Like, the things that I want to obtain, I can kind of obtain them, and I don't want. People have different levels of want, you know what I mean? But I'm not like a car guy. I'm not the house guy. I'm not the, I love my house. I have a car. Like, that's not the things that I go after. And then the things that I kind of covet get sold on Black Friday. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm like, oh, the plugins are like 80. The things I want are like $59 plugins. Like those sort of things. Or like, oh, okay, I do feel a little bit of like happiness, not a little bit, a lot of happiness that it's like, that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to achieve things. I'm trying to achieve like, oh, this person had this sound and times changed, and then he adapted to that sound, and he learned from a lot of the younger engineers of like what's important. So when I'm like talking to 40 and I'm talking to Ali and I'm talking to, just everybody in the community, I'm figuring out like, okay, there's better tools now and the focus is different. Yeah. Like I love the fact that like the Atlanta guys get celebrated for all those vocal effects, right? I love that. So I'm going to naturally listen to that and be like, okay, how can I incorporate some of that? No, I'm not using auto-tune, but it made me like start fleshing out vocals in a way that like, how can I be creative and not use auto-tune, but just do like all these little stutter effects and do all these like things that can enhance the vocal, or like vocals became a bigger thing than just like what reverbs are we putting on. It became the job of the engineer to like do vocal effects that even the producer doesn't know about. Right. You know, those sort of things impress me. Or just listening to a lot of Ali and what Kendrick would do in terms of like give you different voices to mess around and play with is like, oh, that's an interesting thing. Now that's going to make me like not necessarily on a Jay-Z record, because Jay-Z is just a straightforward, like I'm giving you the vocal, but on other artists, you know, that I work with, I may say, okay, like do this in this texture. So because I have in mind that I want to do this with an effect. So it in terms of just like the style of the way things go, I'm always studying and watching just like what people do and the way to present records. And I think that's what makes Meeks out, because it's like almost like that culmination of, okay, here's all the things that I've been thinking about that I would want to do, you know, and here's me just making different attempts using all of the new plugins that I have.
Oh. With the new plugins and stuff, I know, well, I think I know quite a few of them, but since we're on the topic of vocal production, I know I don't get a chance to record people as much as I used to, but I know I like Vocal Synth 2 a lot. I know I like Nectar a lot, just the idea of them. But what are some of the ones that are?
Can we talk about that? That's crazy. Like you're like just you can't skip over those. And I think the reason why it's perfect for us to have the discussion is, well, I'll get into listing plugins, right? But you just said two that fall into this thing of an overall thing of AI. Yeah. We now are in this point of where AI is now in our job. It's like it's Nectar. Oh man, I wish I had my list up. I don't have a list. There's some really good plugins that are now. If the what is it, Oak Sound, that has the it has Spiff and it has Soothe. Soothe is sort of the same thing. Like looking at the dynamic responses. There's just so many good ones, man. Like that thing of AI coming into our world, I think is the thing that excites me. You see me perk up because I'm just like, yo, this is incredible. Like for Nectar, there are things that become automated where I'm like, oh, you're taking a skill or with something that's like you're trying to like automate a skill, right? And I don't feel like this is the case. What I feel like in this is the way AI should be. And I think they nailed it with this, right? iZotope really nailed it with this, is you're taking a process that took me 8 hours, not 8 hours, but like a good 3 hours and making it happen in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
So by the time that I was like, okay, you're initially going to get a vocal, right? When any vocal that you get, there's going to be problem resonant frequencies. Right? Just from, it's impossible to record anything and not have those resonant frequencies. It just is. So you're going to try to take those out first, because when you start compressing and doing all these other things, you're going to bring those out more. So if you take them out first, then compress, it's better, right? This is subtractive EQing. This is EQing of taking out. We all know how to do this, right? Well, I hope. Let me not assume again that everybody knows how to do this, because I have students at every level. So what you do is, instead of EQing to add on, you EQ to subtract. You would make a small Q, right? A very small. If this is a wide Q, you make a small Q as small as whatever EQ you're using, and then you turn that up as maximum, and then you sweep that frequency, and right where it's like it's the most annoying thing, whichever is the most annoying frequency to you at that particular point, that's what you notch out, right? That's where you're going to find the problem in that particular frequency, and it's a very effective way of notching out problems. That would take me a certain amount of time. Yeah. Right? Then I would compress, do all these other things. But the real key here of why I flipped out about Nectar is the follow thing. where it's like when someone sings, it's not just that one particular frequency.
They change keys.
It's going to sort of do this as they're singing. It's going to move this way, move back. The problem I'm talking about. So now that we have this intelligence of AI, you're actually following the problem as it moves. So in Nectar 3, when you hit that follow button, you'll physically see it. And it looks on my EQ, it's just doing this. It's moving back and forth for that one point. Then there's one here, and it's moving back and forth. And you would have had to have somebody sitting at a physical EQ going like this.
Automating.
Yeah, like it's impossible to do. You know what I mean? And then it's like, that sort of thing is saving me so much. We all know the concept of how to do it, but it's really giving us a calculator. It's like me being an accountant and going, okay, yes, I know how to add and subtract. Now that you know how to add and subtract, I can't be an effective accountant for a Fortune 500 company doing everything by hand. This is why we invented calculators. This is why we invented computers. This is why we make spreadsheets that go, okay, I've been doing this for this long here. Where am I at? It's why we automate. And I think it's a great thing that we now have this AI inside of our, but I do want to caution people of running the risk of, like, I saw one guy where he made a comment. He was like, oh, the oodles and noodles mix is this. I'm going to put that in ozone right now. And I'm like, that's great. And he was trying to compliment me, right? And I was like, that's great, but I don't want us to get to a point where people are just like, oh, I'm just copying this mix to this mix to this mix to this mix. And it's just like, don't try to just analyze Dre 2001.
The dark arts.
and then go, okay, let me put that on my mix. You can, but you're always going to be chasing that thing instead of you becoming the next thing that people love. So
let me interject real quick right there. I think that's the part that I won't speak for anyone else. I speak for myself. That's the part I'm lost on, right? Mm-hmm. How do you so we have tools like this where I reverse engineer anybody. So if I wanted to, like if I care, like if I had motivation, right? But I don't know how to resolve the conflict of whatever I'm doing right now, I don't have enough attention anyway. So if I do this thing that may not be ideal, I run a short game of getting attention from it. Because I think this is a sentiment that a lot of people I see on Instagram, like when they do type beats or they pick up on something, versus which you said, which I think is important, but I'm having a hard time making it realistic. Like, well, if you do it the other way, the exact opposite of the pure way, then that increases your chances to be, for lack of a better word, special. And the only people that seem to make it and have high profile are special. So you would want to align yourself with that. But
I don't know if that's necessarily true. And I'm going to ask you a series of questions in trying to answer your question.
Okay.
I don't assume that, and I'm going backwards, but I don't assume that just because someone has an exceptional amount of attention that they are special.
Okay, yeah, I can agree with that.
We would love for that to be the case. We would love to say, this person has been put in this position of prominence because they're very good at what they do, and I aspire to be that.
Okay.
They have a skill level that I am trying to attain. Right? That's how we would like it to be.
Yes.
That is not necessarily the case when you deal with pop culture or with people that bring certain things in. And I'm going to be very long-winded here, but I'm going to get to a point. And there's going to be some people that are going to really disagree with me with what I'm about to say. I don't think Basquiat is an incredible artist. I think the idea behind what he does is incredible. His explanation of the art is incredible. If you get into Basquiat was into this thing of like, you can't trap me into 26 characters, right? I need to express myself outside of just the human expression. When I say 26 characters, I'm talking about the letters of the alphabet. Like, if you think about it, how we trap ourselves, like this, we've been given a form of communication. These are the letters that you have, and this is how you can express yourself through these words. Basquiat's whole idea was like, I'm breaking out of that. Mm-hmm. That idea in and of itself is incredible. When I look at the work, I don't think that he could touch Dondi. Okay. Dondi is one of my favorite graffiti artists of all time, and I'm using someone from his time period to explain this concept. Basquiat, Dondi both wrote Trains at the same time, together sometimes. Dondi, to me, is style master. He is the king, right? He didn't go downtown and hang out with Warhol.
Right.
Basquiat went downtown and hung out with Warhol. He then got on a scene where people were like, oh, what is this new thing that you guys do? It's called this, da 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 da. Oh, can you paint me one of those? Yes, I'm going to put it on canvas. A lot of the graffiti artists from the Bronx was like, painting on canvas? He's a toy. We won't paint on canvas, we paint on trains. Like, that's who we are. It's an art, it's rack and paint. It's being in the yard, it's feeling all these things. It's da 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 da.
Yeah.
So who becomes the guy that has paintings that are worth millions and millions and millions of dollars? Basquiat. Doesn't mean the talent level, it's the story behind it. And I think that sometimes is a really discouraging thing for some of the creatives that I talk to, where I'm like, this is the reality of life. This is the reality. In art, a lot of times people are just as interested in the story as they are in the art itself. And us as creators, who are people who are trying to master a certain thing, I say this to my students, and again, I'm being long-winded, but I'm gonna answer your question. I say this to my students all the time. You realize that we work in an industry, or you're trying to work in an industry where people do not care at all whatsoever about what you do? You're invisible. Yeah. They don't care. The only thing that matters is what comes out of the two speakers. That's it. They don't know. They have no idea. The average listener has no idea that we've been having this tight beats discussion for however. They don't know that. They don't know that. They don't care. You have to realize that. And what is your goal? What is your end goal? Who are you making this music for? Who are you making the music for? If I'm making the music, I have music. I'll give you another example. And I'm getting to your question. My release or my fun is photography. I love photography. I love the fact that I do something creative that I don't sell. I don't sell my photography. It is something that I do for the love. I love photography. I love getting better. I love studying photography. I'm all the way in it. And there are photos that I will never put on Instagram. For legal reasons too, because Instagram gets to use your photos, whatever, but not even for that, but for the real reason of like, I'll shoot with like Van Styles or like Evidence from Dilated People, and I'll go, I love this, but this is probably gonna get, 500 likes on the gram, right? Versus like if I put up a picture of Jay-Z is gonna get, 50,000, right? That's not what my Instagram is for. I have things that I know where I'm like, okay, the general public will understand this, and I have things that are only for photographers.
Right.
Where they're going to understand and be able to read the lines,
the nuance,
what I was doing in the picture and why it's such a dope picture, right? But do other photographers buy other photographers' photography?
No.
They do, but in very small amounts, you know what I mean? Versus like trying to sell a book to the general public. If only other photographers bought it, it's not going to sell as much as when the general public buys it. So I don't battle with those things of, and this is a reason why when I first heard of type beats, and I first saw this conversation with like the sentiment of people, I think Ninth had posted some stuff where he was like, yo, you'll never be you. Why are you trying to be creative? And then people were firing back like, not like, you OGs don't understand how much money we're making online. You do not understand the culture of online beat selling. You do not understand that we are not, and there are some people who will, teeter in between these. There are some of my guys who are on the online beat community that do not care about making a major label placement.
Right.
Or they claim they don't. And then there are some of my guys that sell a lot of beats online. Yes, that still want to. I don't care who. A lot of you still want that.
Yes.
You still want that big artist. You still have probably made the beat with those artists in mind. You still want to be recognized amongst your peers as having an era or a time or I think we are not doing a good enough job of that nowadays, again, because everybody doesn't read the credits. But it was easier in the physical world to flip it over, and while you're listening, you're reading the credits. So those producers got that shine.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I don't think people really, the people that would like of my age period, that if you would say name the super producers, and they're gonna say like the Marley Marls, the Pete Rocks, the the Premiers, the Neptunes, the Timberlands, the we can go West Coast down south, the Manny Freshes of the world. But I'm like, y'all not gonna give it up for Metro Boomin and Zaytoven, and like y'all don't realize how much
work they put in. Yeah,
done. Like they probably have your catalog like 10 times.
Yeah,
but because it's like, and I think that's another reason why the producers tag the beat so much is like, now that you're not reading the credit, you need to know that it's me. But it's like we're not recognizing the era of now of people that I like to recognize the eras and like yo, you're doing really good work right now, and you're ruling, you're doing this and that. Like people still want that thing, and I think we should give it to them. So this is all in answering your question of if you do a tight beat, and this is from my understanding of what tight beats are, right? Not only is it a certain way of marketing, but it's also falling into saying, this is what my customer wants. It's a way of saying, this is what my customer is looking for. If I make chicken and I go, yo, I make my chicken with this particular sauce. No one's ever made this sauce before. It's da-da-da-da-da-da. And a couple people tried it and they're like, it's cool, but some people are coming in and they're like, I kind of like my chicken like this. Like, no, I don't make chicken like that. I don't make chicken. I do this. This is the next thing. Okay, well, that person's gonna walk out and go get chicken from somewhere else. You have to listen to the customer. I'm not saying to go and like just bow down to saying, okay, I need to make a Drake type beat and a this type beat. That's what Ninth was saying. Like, don't look at somebody else and go, I just want to do that. I want to do that. I want to do that. I'm saying recognize what your audience wants and make the MG the Future type beat. You can label it whatever you want, but make the MG the Future type beat so that in the long haul, I'm coming to you for a certain sauce.
Got it.
You understand what I'm saying? I'm listening to the consumer. I'm recognizing the times of what's going on. That's why we don't make Reasonable Doubt in 2018. I know what's going on. I'm out in the club. I feel the vibe of what's going on. I know where the really, if you think about it, the only thing over like the Jay, the maturation of Jay and the beauty of him is understanding the time and beat selection. The beat are what is evolving and changing. So you can get niggas in Paris when that wouldn't have been before because of the time period. You know, like recognize the time, but then fold it into your way. There's some things, this is a huge thing of the time, auto-tune. Yo, Goo, put some auto. Nah, we don't need that. That's him saying, I've analyzed it. And I'm not, that's not me. So I'm not rejecting that thing. I'm not using that thing because it is a thing of the time. I'm by saying put some auto-tune on it is him recognizing that that's going on. And making a conscious decision to say, I'm not going to use that because that part isn't me.
Right.
So I'm trying to relate that to a beat.
I see what you're saying.
You know what I'm saying? Recognize what's going on. You having the ability, there's a great thing in reverse engineering everything because you then understand how someone did something.
Yeah.
But there's also a thing of what's you. Because when I'm understand what I'm saying, and I want to explain this for the audience. I love the fact that you reverse engineer everything because you're explaining plugins, you're explaining, a technique of how to do something. You're explaining and letting me see it from a standpoint that really relates to me and how I would normally probably use it. But what I'm saying is that in the quest for who am I, who is the world going to know me as, right? It's not about reverse engineering something. It's about who am I? Present myself. What's my creative? We all take in information from the time we're born, right? Someone told us at certain points that most songs have drums and the drum goes here and the snare goes here. There are plenty of songs without drums, but that's what we do. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Or someone said, okay, in the changing of music, of what James Brown did, of making that focus on the one, right? And I don't think people really understand, some of the younger generation may not understand that because all their music is so on the one and so like gridded out, where music, when operatic music or jazz music or something like that, the focus was never on the one. So if opera is 1 2. You go up on the 2, 1 2 3, 1 2 3, 1 2 3. You go up, right? Because the dance is going with that.
Right.
You're doing that dance. That's why it goes up like that. Or in jazz, it's not really that focus is not really on that down beat, the one. So when James Brown changed that, right? Like I'm using, there's a lot of people that changed it. But what I'm saying is James Brown changes this thing. Put the emphasis on the 1 in his band. Put the emphasis on the 1. Boom. Clive Stubberfield, Jabbo, boom. Us as the children of that, the hip hop generation, who we are then sampling that, our drums and our focus are always going to be on the 1. It wasn't until Dilla that I started hearing beats where there's no kick on the 1. And I'm like, you can do
that? Right.
You know what I'm saying?
My
mind never thought of that. Oh, he's doing, but like a couple people got away with it. Like, yes, I would be bugged out where I'm like, Tribe Called Quest has a sample that's 3/4 time. You know what I'm saying? Like, oh, that's an interesting thing. I never would have thought to, like, I'm always gonna chop it to make sure it's 4/4 because that's what I would do. It's like, oh, you get away with that? Yeah, because by the time you get to the 12th bar, it evens out. Oh, word, okay. But my mind started to open up, and it was like, yes, I have all these influences now, but then I have to develop who am I. So as someone who, and I'm gonna take you through this, as someone who has a lot of friends that are like really, really good beat makers, and over the years have been around a lot of them, I have everyone's style and the way that they did it. I don't have to reverse engineer. I'm there when they're making it, right? So I have Dr. Dre's whole career in my head. I have Just Blaze's whole career in my head. I have Timberland's whole career in my head. I have Bink's whole career in my head. I have Jay Dilla's whole career, and not just the stuff you've heard, all the stuff that the people that were around, the people around him, not just the ones that floated on the internet, those, right? I have everything he's ever done. You know what I mean? Like, probably like only the specific people have more than me. Quest House Shoes and probably J-Rock, right? Have more Dilla than me. And I've like scoured there, but I'm saying this to make a point. I have all this information in my head. So what do I do with it? How do I make myself me? That's what took me a long time to get a lot of production out, because I'll make a beat and I'll go, nope, it sounds too much like Ninth. I'll make a beat and I said, nope, it sounds too much like Just. That's not me. And it wasn't until I got with Volley, who's my production partner, that I was like, okay, now I have my thing, and I have no problem showing it to the world, because it's like, it's me. It's you can't do it unless it's me, and I need him as an expression of me. So right. It's like, so now I found a way to be breakbeatish with samples and have live guitars and rock playing, to take track patterns, but to not use the same snare and kick and hi-hat every single. Why do we have all these drum kits and we still use the same snare and the same hi-hat and the same kick on every single record? It makes no sense to me. So I'm like,
just to speak to that, I think what I was thinking was happening with music, from being an online beat maker for so long and downloading every drum kit in the internet. I think what we've done with like the playlist thing, like with what we would do to consume music, if you're too busy to find it, someone curates it for you. I think drum kits curated the best sounds, and what ended up happening is it's really human. So like, if you go on whoever's website that sells beats and you look at the beats sold, you'll notice, oh, the polo snare's in all of them. So right, if you as a kid making beats, I'm putting that polo snare in my kit. And then you go to, oh, the such and such 808 is in all of those. Or when the new rappers come up that you didn't get a chance to hear yet, but we get a chance to hear first, like, oh, they're all using this drum kit.
Right.
We're all trying to like take the current as it's happening before.
And that's what I'm saying. In order to be, I'm trying to give a way of being unique and still being in tune with the time. So like, my mind naturally would be like, okay, let me make trap. If I'm making trap music, let me make some trap patterns, but let me use some different sounds than
that speak to you.
Yeah, that speak to me. Or like, okay, I'll gladly give away my drum folder, right? Mm-hmm. You know, I will gladly give away my drums because I want people to have texture. So there's a difference between like a synthesized hi-hat that just goes and a hi-hat that was recorded with air that has a tail. And I'm not telling you to make 1990s boom bap patterns. I'm saying switch up the sounds for trap, and people will say, oh, this is a different texture for me. This sounds different. It's the same pattern, but it feels different. I'm explaining to you me finding me. Yeah. So if you want to keep using, go ahead. If you want to keep using the same snare, the same
no, I understand.
I'm me who I'm going to be, who I am. And it becomes a thing of that's my growth. So a lot of my music nowadays that is for me is very breakbeat orientated, because No ID told me, like, the breakbeat is dead. So I wanted to force him into understanding that the breakbeat isn't dead. Like, and this is just running jokes that this is a joke. This is one of my best friends and like good friends in the world, right? So we just have these producer talks, and he's one of the people that is like I can go back and forth with about production style. And it's like if No ID's doing this thing and he's creating a whole new style, that inspires me to go say, okay, let me go opposite of what he's doing. So like when he was on 444 and he was combining all of the, like what I consider like all of the newer things, to where it's just like, yeah, he's chopping a sample, but then he's doing like this jazz improv with all of the plugins that we have. And it's just like, okay, I'm gonna make it so that it never kind of repeats as it's always gonna be different with like the stutter effects. And it's like, it was almost like him chopping the sample and then playing the effect on top of the sample to make it that much more unique. And to me, that was a style that hadn't been done before. So it's him taking like his hip hop part, his like learning of what the plugins are doing and all the new things we have, and then like techniques that people do in EDM, and then like, but making that a whole like hip hop thing. It's like combining things, boom, new style of someone that has a bunch of things in their head, right? Me, where I'm like, yo, I don't want the breakbeat to ever die, and I don't care if it's not, what's the song? I was country when country wasn't cool. I'm breakbeat when breakbeat ain't cool. That's me. That's the reason I did, is like for drum breaks. That's me. That's the essence of why I started digging in the first place. So I started coming up with ideas of like, yo, let me break these up into this manner and this manner so I can do these patterns with this, or let me do something that's so far from my normal boom bap hip hop that the stuff that me and Volley are doing is just completely different than all of that. It's going to be an expression where people are going to be like, yeah, I feel you in it, but it's so different, But then it's like, I'm saying all that to say that's how you find who you are. So at the same time, like if you're said producer and you're like, yo, I'm putting up tight beat. Volley made a comment one day where he was like, yo, we should just make a fake account and a fake name and do like the regular version of what everybody else does and see how much we could sell of it as a nobody. Like, and I don't want to say nobody, I mean as a person that's like doesn't have any acclaim, doesn't like just to go through the process to see like what you could actually do and how much of it is the attention from some other source versus the actual beat.
If he hasn't already, he'll be very surprised.
Right. No, I'm saying me, like us too. We were going to sit down and just like do it together and be like, yo, let's just make a bunch of just like, it's going to be that what you're talking about, a bunch of tight beats where it's just like, let's go through the process and see. Like, we don't always have the time to do that, but it's an interesting thing for me because I am advising students, and that's another thing. Like, as young people or as people that are doing something that has never been done before, this has never been done before. All you can do is sort of take the wisdom of someone older and apply it to what you're doing because they've never been through the situation. That's why if an older person doesn't humble themselves, like me, when I was just like, yo, I'm an engineer. So the thing of I don't know how this works is my whole thought process. That's what engineers do. They work. I need to figure this out. That's where our joy comes from. Our joy comes from figuring out how things work. That's in business. That's in equipment. That's in whatever. So when I get into this thing of like, oh, okay, what is a tight beat? I didn't understand how people rented beats. That wasn't my world. I didn't know anything about that. So I started to find the information and go out and seek and go, well, what does that mean? What does that mean on this end? What because people had no. And so instead of going, yo, this is destroying our industry. Y'all are killing yourselves. Y'all are supposed to be, this is the older producers. But it's like, well, older producer, there aren't the budgets that you used to have. Well, older producer, the guy who's going to be the next guy isn't even signed yet. Well, super producer, there's not that many spots left. So instead of me selling one beat for $20,000, right? I'm going to sell 20 beats for, you know, $100, or that those beats that sell for $100 can be sold over and over and over and over and over again. So yes, there are actively people out there that are making, you know, whatever it is on every level. And yes, you're going to have your, you know, your guys that are going to try to sell the services that are like, yeah, I'm making 75, you know, a month. I'm making 50 a month. You know, yes, there may be those guys, but isn't it still really dope that like somebody could make, you know what I mean, $5,000 a month, $2,000 a month, a grand a month from making a beat?
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing. It doesn't, you have to scale yourself to this point of like, yo, I wish the world was back to where producers got 50,000 a track and yeah, but that, you know, look at some of those producers now. Like they wish they was getting, you know what I mean? Like the consistency of what you can do now and sell to the world and sell over. You can't disrespect the business model. What you can do is analyze it and say, okay, where are the holes? What's wrong with it? What don't I like about it? And let's fix this. But I think the business model is, because it's going to get to a point where you're going to be able to make money hand over foot, especially with this new thing that, like, I'm super excited about Tidal being able to be, you can use Tidal in Serato now, because it's just something that I purposely asked for a long time. You know, I specifically went to a conversation with him about this, and he made it happen. And I think it's an incredible thing. It opens up so many different revenue streams, but it opens up so many different questions now, because it's not only Tidal, it's SoundCloud. And so with the thought process being, yes, Tidal has all of the commercially released music. Mm-hmm. Where do we go with SoundCloud? Because SoundCloud has all of the, yo, I just made this beat and song and I uploaded it. And now you're going to have people with access to be able to play out all of those things, or radio DJs that can play out all of those things. Or how do we determine if so-and-so, like MG the Future does this incredible remix that then gets all the like gets these many plays, but then does that go to the artist or does that go to MG? Like, okay, so does if the Fat Man Scoop version of the Faith I Never Knew Before gets all the plays, you know, does Faith get that money, or does Fat Man Scoop version get that money? You know, and this is going to come into play, but these are all, this is where the engineers perk up. This is where we go, oh, problems, I already see what's coming. Let's figure it out and let's jump ahead of it so that we can do something that's fair for everybody. But you won't get there going, oh, this is whack. We ain't doing. No, like, do it, figure it out. Like when I announced the thing about, and I'm so hype about it, I announced the thing about Tidal, you know, having this deal with Serato. People are like, I hope they figured out all the kinks. Oh, how you gonna have Wi-Fi? I'm like, yo, instead of coming at my neck, like let's sit down and let's talk about. I've already thought about obviously I've thought about all those things, so I'm thinking about the solutions. But Pro Tools was whack when it first came out. It was, you know what I mean, it was like 8 channels and it was 16-bit and it was clunky. It gets better. This is what computers do. Like, this is what programs do. Like, figure out if you don't design it, somebody else going to design your world for you. And then we're going to be in locking code. That gets to a point, you know, like that Jared Lanier, like that locking code is real, where you've built so much on a system that you can never change the bottom of the system. So if you see this is the bottom of the system for where we're starting with this. So let's get it right, and we can build so that we don't have to. It doesn't have to be a huge thing of changing the infrastructure.
Makes sense.
Yeah. I know we were. I'm sorry. I know we were getting into plugins and stuff. Okay, so the what plugins am I messing with on the Meek album? Like Nectar 3 was incredible. It does, in my opinion, compress a little heavy. Like when you just do the automatic setting. And no, have I gone through every combination of, like, you get easy, medium, dialogue. You know what I mean? Like you get easy, medium, hard. You get like, what is it? I don't want to misrepresent. I'm not looking at it, but like classic, modern, and then dialogue. Right? Have I gone through every permeation? No. So that's 3 times 3. You know what I mean? Like, it's 3. It's like, what is that? Like 81 different ways you could combine it, right? So I haven't done all of those 81. Sorry, but for me, it compresses a little bit heavy. So then you just, you raise the threshold a little, and that's all it is. It's not a one-stop shop, but what it does is it gets you really close in 30 seconds. and then you can make these little tweaks and adjustments and things of that nature afterwards. What are some of the other things that I really? I mean, my normal go-to.
I got one. I wish I remember the name of this track, but one of them has like this lo-fi piano, and it's doing this funny thing where it sounds like you're panning it. It's like really stereo.
Shoot, which song is that? I wish you could tell me that, because then I could tell you the exact.
Oh man,
like that's another thing. I experiment a lot, and when people are like, "Yeah, I EQ'd it and I turned up 0.3 something on," I just listen. I don't go like I'm literally just listening as I'm doing certain things. So I session and tell you exactly what I did, and then there's other times where again, I'm on a laptop. So if I do like a bunch of creative things, I'll print it, because I'm like, oh, instead of me just freezing it, I'm just like commit. I like the way it sounds, like just commit it. And then I would have to open up the disabled track to be like, okay, let me see, because it may be something that has 6, 7 things on it. You know, like it just depends. Like I've dropped. That's another part of me sort of expanding myself, is that I like my sessions to be simple. I don't like to just do things just because you can. It starts to sonically look like a paper where people got all these different fonts on it and words, and like that starts. It's like, what's the vibe of the song? What are you going after? I like simplicity. But in breaking my own rules, I've started using a lot more of like multiple plugins on one channel, because I work with like say Stu, like Beyonce's engineer. Stu works the exact opposite of me. Stu loves to have, he's known for just like having every slot filled up in everything. Like that's the way he works. And he loves to work that way, of like 1 million VCAs in a session and all that's being bussed to like 80,000 other buses. And like that's the way he works, and it's his system. So in me having to do a joint album with the two of them, you know what I mean? Where it's just like, okay, he's doing these parts, I'm doing Jay's parts, and we're swapping sessions back and forth. It's easier for me to keep it in his way of working, right? Because I'm cutting maybe 1 or 2 or possibly 3 lines. Jay at the most is going to do a lead. He's going to do maybe 2 ad-libs at the most, right? From a technical standpoint, it's not a Tupac thing where like Pac will give you the lead and then he'd give you a lower octave, and then you know what I mean? Like he'd give you all these things. Or a Redman who's going to like do a bunch of different little voices, you know what I mean? Inside of like his rhyming. I don't think people give Redman enough credit for that. Like he's dope. One of the original people to like be rhyming and leave space, and you'd be like, what? He's coming back to fill that in a different voice. So it's just like that, and then vocal effect. Redman was that's a sidebar, but I'm saying all that to say, when I'm working with them, it's easier for me to just record Jay in a session the way Stu works, and then just give it back. If I break the session down into the way that I work, then when I give it back to him, he's got to re-import all of his stuff. It's too. I'm thinking
easier for you to adapt to him.
Yeah, it's easier for me to adapt to him than for him to adapt to the way that I work, and that's what I basically did on that album. So it's just like me working with different people. I try a bunch of different things, and then of course, as Bob Power always says, like I asked him one time, like why Low End Theory sounds so much better than the first Tribe album, and he was just like, "Yo, the tools got better." It was that simple. He was just like, "The tools got that." You know what I mean? Like that, the tools got that much better. We were working in better studios with better tools, and it's just like, oh, okay, that makes sense. Like the same thing with plugins. Like the tools got that much better. So it's just like now, where it would take me a while if I was doing like the old. I mean, I'm just thinking of random tricks. Like you put the reverb on a vocal, right, and then you don't want the reverb to wash out the vocal while it's playing, so you would sort of put a compressor on the reverb, and then you'd sidechain the vocal so that when the vocal come in, the reverb will go down a little bit, and then as soon as the vocal leaves, the reverb kind of springs back up, and you would get these like ill like ending effects and things like that. It's because all I'm doing is like sidechaining the reverb, and I would get these like ill effects. But it also gave space for the vocal to be directly in the middle, right, and not get washed out. Whereas nowadays, you don't have to set up all this side. It's just like grab wave center and like pull the like center part down. And now you can leave the reverb at the level you want, and it's nice and like you hear it, but it's still not washing out the middle, because Waves has gone to the point of saying, okay, now we have mid-side EQing, and I'm going to give you something that really is a mid-side EQ, but it's just a simple version of it. It's just like, here's the center, here's the sides, volume on each one. versus like, yeah, I could take out, I don't know, like any mid-side, EQ and do that same thing, but here's a simple version. Right. I like those sort of things. Like I can, that to me is a tool that got better. So now I can do that and I can automate that. And I can it's just, I can name that for everything. The tools got exceptionally better. We're sitting here talking about, machine intelligence of following like resonant frequencies or like I could go on and on about how much better the tools are. Or when people try to argue this dumb argument of like analog versus digital, and like the tools are that much better. Me personally, if I had my dream, I would work every project to where I'm working inside of the computer and I'm mixing it on an SSL. That would be my dream. But I don't have that ability, and because everybody doesn't have the money for that, number one, people think I only do like these big, super big professional, and I'm like, nah, I work with a lot of like local cats. I work with everybody. Everybody doesn't have that money. So it's just like, okay, you do the best you can. Then if I'm in my own personal space, I have the Equinox. I have the Shadow Hills Equinox as a summing amp. Like I did it's expensive. I'm not, but it's worth the money. I'm not, again, I don't want to sound like gear snobbish, but I'm like, I had the ability to go, okay, let me go and do a shootout. I did a literal shootout of all the summing amps, and I won't name all the ones because I don't want to disrespect any companies. I will just tell you the company that I went with. And the Shadow Hills summing amp it's a godsend. But again, I'm not always in the situation to be in my personal space. I'm recording and mixing sometimes in some of the most obscure places. It's just like people would, they criticize sometimes like, this thing and that thing, and like, why do these vocals sound that way? And it's a bunch of stuff, but it's just like, you don't realize that I did those vocals in a stadium after a show with just a reflector filter, and it came out, decent enough for me to like mix it or do whatever. It's just like I have to adapt to every space that I'm in. So for me personally, that's why I like to walk around like my twin is everything. That's my world. That's my laptop. But I'm not always in the like most pristine audio place, and I think working in the box allows me to do that.
To correct it and fix it and have flexibility.
3 hours of my job before I actually do the mix is fixing. Good 3 hours. Me getting information. I very rarely get a session where I open it up and I go, this is properly labeled, ready to go. I know what everything is. It's not, distorted. The person has made all final decisions on drops, and very rare. Very, very rare.
Problem solving.
Most of it's problems, and a lot of it is, or it could be problems that were introduced by the person because of not. Okay, if you're creating a record and you're producing, and then let's say by the time I get the mix, the vocals are on it, right? And you've produced and you've done drops or whatever. Go through and do simple things like you've introduced clicks and pops because you had it in grid mode and you were perfectly cutting out like this 8 bar. Yes, when you're thinking of the idea. Like, yeah, cut out this 8 bars, mute this, but then go back and make sure that the 808 is fully all the way out so that it's not clipping where you chopped to do drops. Or if it is, put a fade there. If you really wanted to stop at that particular point, put a fade. Like, I shouldn't have to go through your session and clean up clicks and pops and like all those little things that you should have sat at home and listened to.
Right.
Or, like, just there's little simple things like organizing your session. Like if you start with this incredible like recording session template that everybody like, I love templates, don't get me wrong, but understand that you have your template set up for you to do everything that you need to do. Then once you're done, take out the stuff that you didn't use.
Eating up all the DSP, yeah.
Now I'm sitting there, not only is it DSP, but I'm trying to figure, did he use this? Is it because you don't have the buses labeled and it's labeled something weird, and I'm like, it doesn't make sense. So I'm figuring out, which reverbs did he? I'll sit there and I'll play and I'll listen to and I'll watch and I'm like, he didn't use that reverb, or they didn't use that reverb. But why is it still in the session then? Take it all out. Like make the session as less like, yeah. Please make my job a lot easier. So it's, I do that for people. I clean up my sessions. I label things. Write comments in the, in the comment section so I know what's going on. Even if it's something as simple as like, yo, this playlist number such and such is the real clean. Because they'll have a playlist that has like 4 cleans, and I'm just like, well, which one am I supposed to be? You will not believe how many times I've printed the wrong. Oh, that wasn't the right. Well, you have 4, playlists. I don't know which one is the real clean. It's just like, like organizing the session, learning how to do those things. When I first started, like figuring out how, like, okay, I recorded this and I'm sending this to another engineer because I'm mixing, and people get that confused too as well. Like I'm over certain projects to the point where I call other people in to mix records that I've recorded.
Right.
There's no way I could have done Blueprint 2 with me mixing all the records by it just could not have happened.
Okay.
Right? I had everybody working. There's no way I could have done this last record that we did. This was teamwork. The Jay-Z and Beyonce record was teamwork. It was me. It was Leslie Brathwaite. It was Tony Maserati. It was Stu. It was like, because we're all, there's no way if he says to me, we're putting this out on this day. And people have to realize I'm also part of the show. Like, he's doing verses and I'm having to change my clothes into my show clothes to run on stage, get done, come back. Like, it has to be a team. It has to be a team, right? And that's you start calling other people in. So it's just like, when you're transferring sessions back and forth, please, like, you have to be as detailed as possible and as simplify you. I'm not saying like don't do what you want to do. Do what you want to do, but then what you have a specific way of working that no one else does. Simplify it.
Got it. Makes sense. Makes perfect sense.
Yeah. And then it saves me, or I'm at the point now where I'll ask people to, can you send me the sessions the day before, or even before we go into the mix, because I know I can sit I want to save you money, so I can sit on my laptop and organize. This has nothing to do. I'm not even like thinking about, like, I am, but I'm like, I don't need critical listening at this. This is me just organizing things. And that could take me a while. If you run into a thing where it's just like, if I'm mixing a live show and you're talking about literally hundreds of tracks that span a 2-hour period.
Yeah.
So my session is 2 hours long and there's 130 tracks. Like, organization is key.
Yes. Man, I can't. That gives me a nightmare, because even when making beats and stuff, I don't want to use more than 16.
Well, I mean, I just make sure that what you do has a purpose. That's my only thing. I see sometimes people doing things, and this is from production standpoint and mixing standpoint. People just throw stuff on there, like they don't even. I see engineers get a session and start importing their their settings, and you didn't even listen to the song. Listen to the song. The song may be, there are some songs that may be absolutely perfect with you just pushing the faders up. Mix some jazz records. Push the faders. That's how you mix in jazz. You just push the faders up. Yes, I got slight compression going on here and there, but all that was taken care of. Some Just Blaze records. Don't need nothing more than you to push. He's done all of that already. Mm-hmm. Here's a person we know that's very particular about the way certain things sound, how this relates to this, how this 808 is carved out for this kick. He does all of that already. Just push the faders up, give it some reverb, like, be very minimal. Now there's some where he might just maybe specific and say, I didn't do anything to this. Go in. You know what I mean? But there's some where he like, there's some mixes that I have with his Rock the Mic, I think is like maybe, a compressor on the kick, and then everything else is like me doing stuff on the SSL, reverbs and stuff, of course, but just like not a whole lot of super processing. It depends on what source material you're given. And then it's like, then you make these decisions, which is sort of the reason why I don't really rock with presets that much on EQs, on EQs and compressors. I do with time-based things. There's really only 2 effects, right? There's frequency-based effects, and then there's time-based effects. That's it. There's only 2, right? And so the things that are frequency-based, you would have to have. This is EQs, compressors, things like that. You would have to have my exact vocal, like, even if it's the same artist. Like, say, so some people will be like, oh, well, I'm recording so-and-so and you record this person, can I get your setting? I'm like, well, you'd have to be in the same room with the same microphone. The room would have to be at the same temperature. You'd have to have the same like exact everything. And the person would have had to ate the same thing that they ate that day before they recorded the vocal that you're talking about. Right. I'm trying to overdo it to make a point to be like, every single vocal take is different. Even with a person standing at a microphone like this, and then they go to read their thing and they're like, oh, they're thinking, and they may go like this. And they move, even this is different in the same day. So it's just like my settings on my EQs and compressors I don't know why that would make sense to anybody.
I think people grab for that because I think, to be honest with you, like if it's not you growing up in the area you grew up in and everything, I think a lot of people are clouded by internet information. So everyone, like we ask basic questions like, I remember asking questions about mixing vocals all the time and people will give you the simple answer, right? Level, pan, EQ, compression, but they won't explain the relationship of those things. But then you'll see these same people interact with when the Black Album came out, and they'll start talking about how magical that was after giving you the 4 basic things. So what you actually have why people ask you those kind of questions is because someone put a magic buffer on the results of successful albums.
There is no magic EQ. There's no because every source material is different. There's no magic compressor setting. There's no magic EQ, and then you have to also be aware, of who's giving you the information and what type of music they make. Yeah. So, somebody giving you a compression ratio for drums, or pardon me for 1 second. Somebody giving you a compression ratio for drums depends on the type of music that they make. Like I know plenty of rock guys that swear by the Neve, 33609, the Neve compressor, right? Mm-hmm. I hate that compressor. I've never been able to get it to work properly for me. Like on nothing. And I know people that make great records. It doesn't hit hard enough for me. It just doesn't. It's not the thing that I'm going after. And what I'm going after is not what my friends who make rock and roll are going after. You get the point. You got to be careful about somebody going, this is the compression, this is the setting for this. Fast attack, da-da-da-da-da. And it's like, for what? Like, what are you trying to get? Sometimes I want my vocal to be really controlled because I have, like somebody that yelled, like for years, Memphis Bleak was like his voice goes up and down, up and down, up and down, up and down. Whereas Jay is like super steady. Or if I'm recording Busta Rhymes, Busta's animated in height. Or if I'm recording MOP, they're going to yell at me. You know what I mean? Like in a great way. Like, but I can't just give you one thing is going to work for all
everybody, right?
Even with the same singer, like if the singer's doing a lead vocal versus an ad lib versus like sometimes I'll ask singers to like just hum the melt, like humming gives you the and it gives you the middle without having attacks and releases, and you can place that underneath the vocals to like add on. The compression for that is different than an actual vocal where they're going up and down and they have these different peaks and there's different, like all that's vocal. But I'm just making a point that is silly to me of someone saying I need your EQ or your understand. My professors were really good at teaching us what that thing did.
Okay.
And learning that thing versus learning, here's the setting that I used. So what is a compressor? What does it really do? What are the different types of compressors, right? What is an EQ? What does it really do? What are the different types of EQs? When I say types, I mean the way in which it works. So it's going to be obvious to you that when someone says opto compressor, like this is how I explain things to my students, where I'm just like, what does the word opto mean, right? Why would you use the word opto, right? That has to do with light. So that obviously means that in some way, light has to do with the way that this compressor is working. So it's just like, yes, if you would open up like the old compressors that had tubes, you would literally see the light getting brighter and smaller inside of the tube. You're going to know that can't be instant. That has to have some time to do that, right? Versus like, okay, know the times when you want this gradual thing versus when you want almost like, there are some digital, plugins now where the compression is almost, it's like no milliseconds.
Yeah.
It's instant. Yeah. The compression, there's no time for the thing to work. It just absolutely works from the gate. It's like, oh, that's interesting. You know what I mean? Like, That's a super interesting thing. And then it's just like, okay, also understand like the concept of what you want. If you have a really slow attack, it's gonna make your drums hard. Great. If you have a really fast attack, it's gonna even out your vocal, but you gotta be careful to like not take the life out of the vocal, right? But it's like those sort of things. Know what the thing is doing and why, and then you can easily say it's not that many things that you really have to like really get into and figure out why, and then read. Like I'm like everybody else. I get a new plugin. I want to use it that exact same day, but then when it's a Saturday, you know what I'm saying? Like watch a bunch of YouTube videos, and then eventually read the manual. And this is something that you're using to make. You know what I'm saying? There's so many things that you figure out when you're like, oh, this is how the person intended for this to work. Here's what I could do. Here's things that they didn't intend for. What is this little button? There may be little buttons hitting inside of plugins. There's plenty of times where I'm like, oh, I didn't know if you touch that this thing worked.
Turned around and everything, yeah.
You know, that's the way I work. Like I'm just like everybody else. Yes, I know. It's like I did a commercial one time for Infiniti, like the car commercial, and it's like me driving around a track. And the first time I got in the car, the director's like, "Go ahead, get out your system." I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Go ahead, just, like go 150 miles around the thing. Like, go ahead, have fun. Like, go get it out your system first, so that we can film this, because you probably will never be on another track like this where you can just go as fast as you want." So that's what I mean with plugins. It's like, yo, get out your system, like mess with it, but then like sit down and figure out the plugin itself.
I agree. I wholeheartedly agree with that. That's what I kind of do. Like when I do the videos and reviews I do it at that moment when someone says, go run that first lap.
Yes.
That's how I like to capture that energy, because I notice that's when I'm most excited, and that's why I didn't get a chance to compare it to anything else.
It also gives you the ability to act as your consumer, or for the ability for you to act the way the consumer would act. Where it's just like, I assume, and this is from me looking now at the plugin companies, you have to assume that not everybody has a certain level of understanding.
Yeah.
So you have to say, how does this work for someone who's just getting this and may not have been a previous user of whatever the plugin was? So this may look foreign to them. Or how does it affect the iZotope users that when I change my interface to look from this to this, I think that the new iZotope interface looks way better. Yeah. It draws me in way better. And I think that's a huge point that people don't understand. And like the visual thing of the plugin reminds you of a sound. So the visual part, you realize we could use all these plugins and they could be nasty, ugly, and they could just have sliders, and you could still get the same audio result. It's like in Logic where you can switch to the slider value thing. It still works, same part, but mentally, when I'm looking at a picture of an LA2A, the sound of an LA2A comes in my mind.
Right.
Because when you were doing it in an analog world, you would turn it like you're sitting at a board, right? The equipment is behind you, your rack of equipment, and you would turn around and you would make a selection based off looking at something. But the visual of that thing, you've associated a sound with that visual.
Makes sense, yeah.
So that part is important too, and like for plugin companies, like the way that it looks. And also like ergonomically, like where I grab for things. Do I have to go through 80,000 pages to get to something? And that gets annoying.
So, friction, too much friction.
Too much friction. Or I didn't realize personally, these are just my personal stories. Like I've used an Eventide H3000 almost like my entire mixing career. I realized when I got the plugin that I didn't delve into, I probably touched about 3% of what that machine could do over the years. Now that I physically can see inside of the machine and I can move now you can take the wires and it's like modular. Like I can move them around. Mm-hmm. I'm doing way more complicated effects with it because I can physically, when you were looking at a 2-line LCD screen, like, you know what I mean? In numbers, it was like, it was a struggle. And I got to go in, you're talking about 16 pages to start changing something. That's how I knew, like, the assistants that were really dope, if they could like recall like an H3000 or something, because it's not the easiest thing to recall. And that's where I used to get all. That was another secret. That's another part of like my attitude of why like people be like, well, certain engineers, they were like, go stand by the patch bay and don't move to the assistants. And, people used to like stun a lot of people, like go through that hazing thing, but people didn't realize that like The assistants are the way that I am now, where in terms of they work with so many different people. If you worked at Hit Factory, if you worked at Sony, if you worked at any of the major studios that were in New York City, from Sound on Sound to wherever, Quad to wherever, you were working with so many different people. You knew every piece of gear backwards and forwards because you had to do recalls. So you had to know how to like get into the nooks and crannies of each piece of gear. So the assistants is when the assistants like picking my brain for like balancing tech, I'm picking their brain because this new piece of thing just came out and they've touched it a million times and I haven't used it yet. So it was like always picking somebody's brain of like, how to use this equipment? How does this thing work? How does this thing work? How does this thing work?
Right.
Or, before we got into the plugin world where like now you can just hit Command S. You had to know your machine inside and out.
Yeah, that's why I don't envy missing that era. Because I
don't miss any of that. I don't miss, and that's another part of the lore that people would try to give you of the analog world was better, but they don't tell you the negative parts of the analog world of like being in a session with the producer on the production tip, being in a session with the producer, and they've traveled from, I don't know, from wherever, and they're like, oh, I forgot my discs. And they've traveled wherever from everywhere, and they have their discs, but then they're like, oh, my 1050 has these different cards in it. My 2080 has these different cards. I have to tell you about that. So now we're going to have to take another hour to call, the rental place to get the proper cards. Oh, I don't really know how to save everything in the Rollins and all that. I just know how to do it my way. So then when I go into a different position, so it's like a waste of time and I have to sit there and try to recreate the beat. Or it's I've been sitting there with all these old keyboards and we've been creating a beat for 4 hours, 5 hours. We go to eat lunch, we come back. Now I have to retune all of these because they naturally drift. All old keyboards, they would naturally drift. And you would have to sit there and retune and retune and retune. Oh, the battery went out in the Clav. Maybe twice in my life, I pulled the battery out without like pulling out the actual thing, the lead, because they're so cheap. So it was like, that was just my thing. That was like, it was a 9-volt. So you would always have to like try to pull the connection off and it would inevitably break the connection. And you sit there and you solder for it. I'd be like, oh, I used to hate when the Clav battery would go out. These are all real world things that like happened. You would, in order to use tape properly, you got to come into the studio an hour ahead of time. You got to demag the tape machine, right? That's literally running this little thing across all the heads to demag. A tape works off magnification. It's a magnetic field. So you have to demag the whole thing so that the flux is exactly where it was for when the person made the machine. Then you have to put up tape and you have to make test tones on that tape, which is the way that you can take this tape from this studio to another studio and have it. I'm trying to explain all the work that
understand. Yeah.
You'd have to lay tones and then you'd have to like slice the tape. Then when you come in, you'd have to like lay the beat down for 6 minutes, 7 minutes, because you don't know how long the song's going to be. The person hasn't written the song yet. And the producer's just laying the beat. So it's just straight all the way, however many tracks. And then, like it was a lot of stuff that people don't give the credit of the way that we work in digital and the flexibility of editing. Do I miss the depth? And yes, I do miss some of the depth that we got from tape, but I feel like we get a lot of that back with the plugins. We're just not properly using them because we're overloading them. We're making everything go too loud.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Not having that experience using those tape plugins or using any harmonic saturation, especially since we get our kits mastered already. Omnisphere is like through the ceiling level wise and effect wise. Like it's hard to even mirror that time, not because we don't have the tools, but because we don't have the context of those tools.
That's the part that people don't have. They don't have the context of the tools. Now, mind you, let me say this to begin with. That is one taste. There's one sauce. It's one particular thing. So if you like that, now it's a taste that people say that they like. They go, oh, I miss this. So if you want to get to that, this is back when I was explaining when Dr. Dre controls the whole thing.
Yeah.
You got to think about that in plugin form. If you have something that has never come outside of the box, then start putting things in your chain that represent all of those stages. and we start to now have those things, you know, in our toolkit. But it's like, think about how many stages this thing went through. It was a vinyl record, a needle, right? Touched it. What type of needle was that? What turntable did I go through? What mixer did I go through? Did I EQ on the mixer, right? Then that mixer then goes into a sampler. What sampler was that? And this is game that I gave to a bunch of the companies. I told them, I was like, what you should do is just take all the take the MPC 3000, take the 1200, take the actual outputs of that and sell boxes that
are just now. That's common sense. Like, what are they waiting for?
Sell boxes that are just those that are USB. So you'll have one that's just the MPC 3000 USB connected. So when I want a physical output that sounds like that, because that center section of that 3000 was special, like, do it for all the major things. And people go, oh, yo, I like the ASR sound. Do that. I like it's the same way SE Electronics, you know,
with the filter cartridges.
The little cartridges on that Omni 8. It's just like, yo, that's the whole point. It's different filters. I've said that to a bunch of the companies. I don't know how far, you know, how fast or how far, or if they even see that as something outside of their niche. I don't know, you know, but to me, that would be common sense. Obviously, they're all focusing on plugins because they see that as the future. But also, what you have to understand is that everything is a predictable flow. So if we get to a point where it's like, oh, everything's in the box, and then once everything was in the box, we immediately felt like, I'm a human being. I like tactile surface. I need something to touch. It's not the same making music, mixing music, any of that with just my mouse. So then people go, okay, let's make controllers. We got fader packs now. We got all these things that like make it so that we have this human tactile interface. Eventually, we're going to get to a point where we have just that one thing. Well, this is before we go into the other thing that I could talk about, but we're going to have that one box that we can, and we're starting to get to that point with what is it, soft something that has the one box that'll do
the soft tube console one.
Console, but we'll have that for everything, right? Where it'll just pop up and it'll be automatically mapped, you know, the same way that we have auto mapping and all that stuff now, right? So that we can have a physical thing to touch. Or if you look at the difference between like when you do fades on a physical controller and what the dots look like on your line versus you drawing a straight line at the end of your song as a fade. Like fades aren't just perfect, like just straight line at the end of songs. If you look at the way human beings hear, it'll be like this curve that goes like that. You know what I mean? With all these dots, you'll start to see the difference in like human interaction with all of this is for us to interact with the computer. The computer don't need that. We need the screen. We need the keyboard. We need the mouse. These are all ways to interact. So just think about this as a way to interact with your music. That's going to become the big things. Physical things outside of the computer are going to become the big thing.
Agreed.
Actually having physical filters that can mess up and go bad over time, and you got to recap them, and like, because it gives a texture to the sound. Before we get like when we get all the way into, and this is a natural thing that's not that far off, when we have virtual mixing, and when I say virtual mixing, I mean, yes, us in augmented reality or virtual reality with the goggles on, and we're sitting there and we're touching things, and that thing represents it. Like the Fairchild is going to pop up in front of you and you can turn the knob in virtual. We're still going to want a physical thing to feel when we do that. That's eventually where we're going to go.
Yeah, I agree.
So somebody's going to release a program that does that, that says, okay, the commercial is going to be like, live inside your Pro Tools. You know what I mean? Like whatever it's going to be, right? It's going to be, you know, you in virtual reality touching things, but you're still going to need that sensation, or the glove is going to have to give you that sensation or something. You know what I mean? As we get, before we can get to a real holodeck, you know, we're not there yet, but that's where we're going. We're going to the structure. Yeah. So, but imagine if you could be like, the advantages of that, of we get to the point where we're like, yo, today I want to mix in Abbey Road. And you're literally in room A in Abbey Road because we've modeled that and we've modeled what the reflections are. So it's like that thing is going like, and okay, today I want to mix in Sound on Sound. Sound on Sound doesn't exist anymore. The only remnants I have of Sound on Sound studios is stuff from my Altiverb, where people were smart enough to do to like, you know, take samples of the room. So I have like samples of what the reverb in the room sound like, you know, like through convolution verbs. But other than that, I can't be in the sound of that room anymore. I'll be able to reinvent that through pictures. I'll be able to take pictures of rappers being in that room and give that to somebody, and they'll be like, okay, this is the dimensions of the room, this was the wood, this was the, and now you can mix in that room again. That's where we're going. Event 20 years from now, and maybe not even 20, 10.
Yeah, more like 10. Yeah, I agree. I've seen it. Like, you know, Adobe, they don't do really anything audio like that, but they have those things where you take a picture or video of something without sound, and then the computer makes the sound.
Yes.
Like just a crazy, it picks up on the waves and stuff. Like just like what you were saying, you take all your pictures of your favorite spots and have, you know, Adobe batch process a impulse.
I'll tell you, and I'll tell the audience, I tell everybody, it's again, it's the Matrix thing. It's don't be scared of it. They can never be as fast as you. They can never be as fast as you, ever. And that there's an infinite amount of space in between zero and infinite. And you don't have that gap. So you as a human being, you know what I mean? The computer can only do what you feed it. So when we talk about machine learning, or we talk, it's still doing repetition. It's still, if something then go to line, it's still the same thing. It's still the same thing. It's still the same program. It's just happening really, 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 really fast. I'm more scared of what people will do with it versus the technology itself.
You mean like in terms of how the culture will accept it?
No, I'm talking about just everything. Like in terms of, sometimes we look at the older way that we did things. Some of the older engineers don't like the fact that certain things are automated. One, because they feel like it knocked them out of a job. Two, it demystified the black magic that was going on in the studio. And this was a place where you kind of like had to go to that place to get that information.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It was almost like a guild where it was just like, you got to go get the information from here. So it knocked a lot of that out. It knocked out actually like the studio itself.
Yeah.
Right? Where it was just like, okay, you got to pay me this amount of money to come in and make a record. We don't have to do that anymore. So what I'm saying is that people will stop technology from happening when they see that their money is being, you know, where their money is being knocked out, or the skill that they do is being knocked out, and they'll fight it. And then it's just like, nah, like it's just the natural way that things have to go. It has to go. It literally has to go that way. You have to evolve, and you have to, like, I'm sorry, if you made 8-track, you know, cassette tapes, we just don't use those anymore. I don't care if that's your passion. I don't care if that's like what you grew up doing. Society doesn't use those anymore. You know what I mean? Like if you made a fortune on CDs, you know, society doesn't use those anymore. We don't even use those for data trend. Like when we, you know, not even just for music, just for like data. Like, you know, like where we used to just be like, oh, okay, I'm gonna put this information on a CD. We have USB sticks, and then pretty soon we're not gonna have USB sticks in it. You know what I mean? Or we're gonna have something that's just like maybe one universal is like, oh, I don't want to put my sensitive information in the cloud. I want to have it on me and just in this physical thing. But this one little stick that's probably the size of your eye lock is probably going to be like, you know,
tons of terabytes,
whatever. You know, however much you say, like, you know, it's just going to be ridiculous. It sounds ridiculous for me to say, but me and Just first like went out and bought hard drives, and we first like put in a Pro Tools system. We were gassed when we got 9 gig hard drives. We were like, we'll never need another hard drive ever again in life. Why would I ever need another? I have a 9 gig hard drive. Why would I ever need another hard drive? Like that's, you know what I mean? From to go from that to that in a certain amount of years was just like, yo, this is crazy. And I used to bug out to be like, you know how much I paid for like this? And it just keeps getting. My point being is, it's going to continue to move. It's going to continue to move, and you have to move with it. And you have to. Some of us are lucky enough to direct it. And then some of us can be lucky enough to like step in. And then some of us see it from different angles. And then like we have to educate people that don't see it from that angle and understand why certain things are necessary and why certain things are good, and then why certain things are negative. So it's just, you know, it just depends on it just depends on where you want to go with what you want to do with all of this. But I am an engineer, and I mean that in the truest sense of the word. Not just a music engineer, but just someone who likes to create things. And I also study the same way you study and follow trends in music. I study and follow trends in engineering. I study and follow trends in, just computing in general.
That makes sense, man.
Yeah.
Man, we can end it here for now, man. I think we went to oblivion, man. We were on hour 2.5.
That's all good. I could talk audio all day. Did I give a list of plug? I mean, people are going to say the plugins.
There's a few questions that came up in my periphery. I guess the first one that I'll shoot out some questions. So what are some good, since you're on the road and you're traveling and everything, what are some good headphones to use that won't hurt your ears but would get you a close, decent, experience for mixing or just producing?
There's two different things. Like, okay, so I did, and this is not a commercial for my headphones. I did these, and it's weird that I just had them like there. Like, it looks so like a commercial that I pulled it out. But these are the ones I did with IAI. But they're like, IAI does those with different people. Like A-Track did them. I did them. I did mine specifically for mixing. But I'm saying all that to say I don't know how many still exist in the world. And it was just like a deal that they did for like a special edition. Those I love. The other ones you have on your ear. So I live and die off of these. These are like my favorites. Probably because I know them the best, and that's the main thing I would tell people. There is no like best speaker or best headphone. It's it's more important for you to learn. Yes, there are expensive headphones that are really clear, but it's more about you learning the headphone than it is about like how expensive the headphone is. It's do the mix, go listen to it in another room, and realize what your headphones are doing to the song, because it'll be like, oh, you'll listen to your mix and it won't have enough bass, right? And then you'll turn the bass up, and then you'll go somewhere and you'll listen and be like, oh, it's way too much bass. Now my kick is getting drowned out, and it was my headphones that were doing that. So you got to just learn the headphones and learn your speaker. That's what speakers do.
Another one. So when you were talking about like gain staging, since most of us watching are probably going to be in the box and capturing it, like you said, with UAD cards or whatever, what's a good line level or level to watch for when recording our vocals?
I always like to go around, like, for me, I like to go around -18 to -12.
Okay.
Sort of, kind of. I mean, it depends on what it is. The ultimate rule is don't go in the red.
Okay.
Don't ever touch the red. That's the ultimate rule, number one. Just don't ever get that loud that you're anywhere near the red. And I mean from the loudest, like, because certain people could start out like this and then get louder. You know what I mean? Like, you want that. So then turn the input down. And again, you're in a digital world, so if you're a little low, you can always bump that up. You know what I mean? You're going to start processing this information anyway. But on recording, when it's coming in, -18, -12, it's a good roundabout number.
That seemed to be a big question. Another one, someone said, I think they're talking about microphones and stuff, and I've used all kinds, but I guess from you, because I know there's, like you were saying about headphones, there's some really good microphones out there, and then there's everything else that we got. What would be a good microphone to aspire to for a bedroom producer or home studio to record local people?
Okay. There's different philosophies. My love is Neumann. I love Neumann stuff. I use 67s, 87s my whole life. There is what is the Neumann don't quote me, TL or TM103. It's the smaller one. Maybe you can look it up. I forget. It's sitting right over there. I could go over there and read it.
Yep.
But, that one is a great one. That's an all around for like bedroom producer inside of it. I want to try out the Slate microphone that I've seen, because if that's really true and you have the option of just like having all those flavors, that would be a great thing. Now there's different things that, let's talk physical microphones. I'll try to make this as quick as possible. Neumanns are my thing. Neumanns are expensive. So if you're a bedroom producer, you don't have a lot of money, go out and buy you an AKG 414, period. You can do vocals on that. You can record trumpets on that. You can record guitar amps on that. With a good AKG 414 and an SM57 or SM58, you can record pretty much everything. That's budget. That's somebody on a budget. That's a quality mic, not expensive, and you can get everything you need to get done. It is my utility mic. Like when I say utility, it's like almost like a utility knife. Like it does everything. AKG 414. Then if you get into more specific things, the dream mic that everybody loves is the Sony C800, which I personally only use on like R&B female vocals. I hate it on rappers. Dr. Dre lives by it. He loves it. It is a very clear microphone. In my experience, for my sound, it's too clean. And the shock mount, the way it's hooked up, you get all of this floor so much more than with the Neumann shock mount. It works so much better. That C800, I get so much floor, which, yes, are you eventually probably going to roll out a lot of the floor? But I tend to get a lot of floor with that microphone. So it's not necessarily my favorite. Again, this is an example of where everyone else is probably going to tell you get a C800. It's an industry darling. They love it. I personally don't. That's just me. I'm trying to think of what else. What else could be a really good thing? I mean, I've seen people make great records with like a Rhodes NT. Yeah. You know what I mean? Like I'm also thinking about like cost. So here's another point. You as the bedroom producer, who I'm not saying you, I'm just talking to the bedroom.
No, I'm a bedroom producer. Ain't nothing wrong with that.
I'm saying, and sometimes when you say things in audio, you have to be careful of how you say it. People will then go, Guru's about to say the microphone don't matter. The microphone does matter. The preamp is way more important than the microphone. It's way, so if you're gonna do your due diligence, save up and buy the gangster preamp. If you want to put down $1,000, save up that money and buy the gangster preamp and the cool microphone, and then work your way up to the gangster mic. AKG 414 with an incredible preamp is going to sound way better than you having a C800 and into like a cheap preamp or the preamp that comes on like the old like M boxes or something like that. You know what I mean? Like the old joints. The preamp is way more.
Got it. What's a good preamp to aspire to on a budget, like in that $1,000 range?
What I think people should do is really go for these 500 series things, because that's exactly what it allows you to do. You get the rack, right? You can buy now the actual API. One I think is like $800, and there's some like knockoffs that are a little less. Mm-hmm. Some people make it now. There's going to be a lot more of them. The chassis itself. But what that allows you to do is it allows you to mix and match different flavors and do that exact thing. Say, yo, I got $500. I'm gonna get this preamp, and that's in my slot one. And I'm gonna work for another month, and I'm gonna, spend another like $750 or another $500 on this. Ooh, I sold the beat. You know what I mean? So now I got $1,000 that I can, deal with, and I'm gonna fill this. So you start to fill up that 500 slot, and there's so many different things. My 500 slot, I have Neves in there, and I have Neves APIs. I have the ones that the TCI, the blue one with the like little yellow thing. That's like sort of like giving you like Beatles Abbey Road sound. And then I have really cool reamping things. So there's really cool like 500 series where in the back there's an input and output, but in the front it'll give you the send to go to guitar effect pedals and things like that. So it's a really cool way to get in and out of Pro Tools and to like add some life to sterile, like, you know what I mean? Like
some of our synths and stuff. Yeah.
You can like go out, deal with the real world, come back in all from this one, you know what I mean? Just one 500 thing. So there's different flavors. The Neves are really, they distort really well. They bump up the mid-range. I'm giving you the overall for the people out there that don't know the difference. Neves are great for vocals. They're great for guitars. They distort really well on guitars. They naturally bump up the mid-range. APIs are very punchy, very like crunchy. I use APIs on most of my drums for the past 20 years. When I was in school in Rockville, Maryland at Omega, they had an API room, and I would always record my drums in the API room. APIs just are incredible for drums. They're good for everything else, but that's the sound. And SSL is punchy. Focusrites are a little transparent, which is a good thing. Sometimes you don't want to color as much. I'm trying to think there's so many brands of preamps.
I think that does. I think people are just trying to figure out. I think everyone's going that way because what you were saying about with the tactile nature. What I've noticed just on this side with the the proliferation of dope plugins, the prices and hardware are dropping. So people are going. I've been, advocating the 500 series for a long time, but I'm actually starting to see people to slowly do it. Some of our brothers who are into Euro Rex and modular and stuff. So that's for them, but then the 500s for us. Yeah.
I don't know if you guys checked out Switched on Bap. Ski did a whole album called Switched on Bap that I mixed, and it's just dope. It's him just with the MPC, and because the MPC now has the control voltage outputs in the back, he's going directly, and he did I thought it was a cool thing. He did like a whole album based off of just modular synths. It's really cool.
Yeah, so I think that's going to make a big impact. Design your own synth, design your own channel strip combos and stuff. So I think that's exciting.
Absolutely. That and then if you look at the SSL, the desk, the XL desk, which is kind of cool. They have the thing now where they're making desks now where you can just swap like the 500 series at the top. Wow. So you can start choosing flavors of your own. And I think the API does that as well. It has slots where you can like load in, a bunch of different things as a board. And then you can scale that, you know what I mean? Like you can do that on any, like I said, on any scale you want, but it's definitely giving you like some flavor before you actually get in. And then I would be remiss if I didn't say Avalons. Avalons are like my version of the like perfectly smooth, it's like the perfect, I don't know, cognac that's like so smooth when you drink it that it's like you don't even feel like you're drinking. It's just super smooth. Like it's just super smooth. A majority of like before I say 2011, 2012 with Jay, where I went to like a 1073 and a Tube Tech. Before then, almost I'd say his entire from 1999 up to that point, I was using an Avalon 737 and using a compressor in the 737. So it was that preamp, that 737. Sometimes nowadays I'll run it to where I'll use a 737, but I'll come through the preamp and then not the compressor. I'll go straight out of the preamp into a CO1B because the CO1B is the CO1B. It does what it's supposed to do. Really. I mean, like it does its job.
That's probably the only piece of hardware I know I'm buying. Like I know it. Like it's just a matter of time. I just know it.
No, definitely. Yeah. There's certain things that just work, and that's one of them. Yes.
And everyone keeps saying keep going, but I don't have any more hardware questions because I'm an in the box guy. So let me ask you. This is more in my park. From all the plugins,
I can't see the questions. I wish I could say, "Yo, what's up?"
If you go to my YouTube, you can't. If you go in YouTube, you'll be able to see it. And when I publish this video, you'll see it on my screen when there's a rewatch. But how do you feel about the proliferation of what I'm calling lo-fi or what the community's calling lo-fi, which you may have interpreted as Tribe, Dilla, hip-hop, classic hip-hop, 90s hip-hop, and those plugins that are seemingly catering to it? Because you mentioned RX earlier. I know you're familiar with some of the other things, but like, what is your... I learned
about the RX like through happenstance, and then it was just like, as I normally do, it's like happenstance, not happenstance, but it's a point that you reviewed it right after that. I absolutely got introduced to the Good Hertz through you. I'm trying to think of like all the plugin companies that do lo-fi. The RC20 I got introduced to through you. I'm trying to think of all the good, like I used the RC20 like crazy on Meek's album too. That joint is amazing. I'm trying to think of what else. But if you're asking an overall question, I love it. I love that people are like, to me, it's just texture. When people say lo-fi, I was like, okay, that's just the name that they're giving to it, and it's cool because for us, it was like that's all we had. All we had was SP1200. All we had was 950. All we had was, me personally, I never owned an SP1200. I owned the SP12.
Right. Like
I had the original one, the blue one with the old Atari like floppy disk joint. And then the 3000 was just my baby. It sounds this. There's never going to be another beat machine that sounds like that. I wasn't really a big ASR guy because I hated the sequencer, but I loved the filters and the way that it made things sound. So what we would do, and when I say we, like Chucky, I worked for Chucky Thompson for a long time, and Chucky used to love. He started off on an EPS 16, and then moved to an MPC. But then we got an ASR rack, and we were just using it as effects. And we would run things through it. We would sample through it, but we would trigger it through from the MPC, or he'd literally play his guitar into the effects of the ASR because he was so used to those effects, and it was like a big pedal box. So I think it's a dope thing. I think it's a thing though of like, it's more for me about the producer being highlighted, and I don't know if that's necessarily what everybody else is looking at it as. I think people are looking at it as like, oh, this is a movement and this is a thing. And to me, it's like, oh, it sounds like where we were in the '90s. But I'm like, okay, if that's what people want and that's what they're going for, then to me that's a great thing. But I love just like the grittiness of it, because that's what I grew up with. I love the grittiness of. We figured out that we missed certain artifacts, and we started sampling directly into the computer itself. Like, and I was playing records into my computer, or now I'm not even at the process of playing a record. I'm like pulling an MP3. You know what I mean? Sometimes where I've changed my process to where I do go back to like my laptop with Serato open and I'm playing MP3s off of my Serato just for the feel of like skipping around records, and like I don't want to import the whole thing. I only want to take the pieces that I want.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like versus like me having to import the whole thing, then chop it up, and then like I only want to take certain parts. So, but I don't know if I'm up on it enough to know like all the nuances. To me, it's like, oh, people making beats with the shit that sounds like what I was doing in the '90s.
It is. I think you know what the most strange thing to me, it wasn't so much that lo-fi hip hop, because I understand the difference between lo-fi hip hop and who's posterized versus what we might call J Dilla. So,
okay, what's the difference?
All right, so the big one is the sound selection. So like, if you listen to Dilla or something, you'll hear Shy Lights, Blue Magic, those kind of things, soul groups.
But let me stop you there. Let me ask you this. So does the selection of sound define genre? Because Dilla would sample anything. It doesn't matter like what. You could just blindly put him to a wall of records and does it. I read this book, right, of this guy breaking down Dilla, and he's like giving all this explanation of like why Dilla chose certain samples. I'm like, he didn't choose it that way. He was working. He pulled out a record, he heard something he liked, and he flipped it. It had nothing to do with like, he's going back to be like, say if he sampled Blue Magic, he would give an explanation like, oh, well, Blue Magic's from this area and this time period and this thing.
No.
None of that mattered. It was just like, yo, I pulled the record, I may have liked the cover, I listened to it, and I flipped something. Like, and that's what I'm asking. Is that determine genre?
This is gonna get really hairy, man. Because if I do lo-fi hip hop today, it's more like J Dilla. Like if there's a dope sample and I feel it, I'm gonna do it with these type of sounds, no matter what the source is. But when you say lo-fi hip hop and you check out the events, or if you check out the big playlist, the curators, the cultural part of it, most of that stuff is anti that. So where we would lean towards what we grew up around and what's on our record wall, they seem to niche in library music. They seem to niche.
Oh, okay.
They seem to niche in.
Is there a specific library like that they go out? Because like all of us, when you say library music to me, like, you know, when we grew up, it was like a thing. Like if you saw KPM records, you just bought it. I don't care what it was.
A lot of that, a lot of Keith Mansfield, a lot of. Like what YouTube does is if you type in one of the samples that they use,
I feel like we're responsible for that, and I'm sorry, my bad.
But you might be. It's just someone else put the Starbucks there, and now we're starting to see it and ask questions. So
we used to do that. Like Just would find a spot that had records, and he like, of course, after he like cleaned it out, and he'd be like, yo, he still got some KPMs down there. You need to go down. So I would just get them all, but then you would sort of find out, and then at one point. There was this huge torrent that was online. That was the whole KPM library, and I think that's where it came from.
Yes.
And then KPM like kind of figured it out and closed that off. But it's like we were salivating after the 1000 series. Like that was our whole thing. So of course, like Keith Mann, like all of those producers that are in that series. Oh, it makes sense now. All right, cool.
So you're already connected to it. I'm just trying to use words to define it so people aren't lost trying to do the other thing when you can just.
That's what I don't know. That's why I'm asking the question, because sometimes I get lost in genres, not understanding what makes one different than the other.
Man, I don't know. Like if I hear like if as soon as it comes on, like if I don't hear that vinyl pop right away, I already know what it's not. So it's very strange. It's very strange if you care. Like if you care about it and you start getting into the romance of it, you'll start to feel it. But I guess I only ask that because it's really not a sleight of hand. It's not that much different than the early Rockefeller period. And what I'm thinking is, um, the conversation is what you said earlier about producers have to be honest with what they want. I kind of feel like this new set of lo-fi producers just want to, make friends and do small little cultured events. But I think what'll end up happening
is that negative? Is that negative?
You know how I think everything's anti-clout. I think like our society is either you're clout chasing and fronting or you're anti that. It's so much so that you get clout for being anti-clout.
I get it. I know this, I'm laughing because I know the sentiment of what you're saying because it's almost like what the rebel was. You know what I mean? When I was a teenager, or I get it. I get exactly what you're saying. Or the person that was just so underground hip hop that was just like, I don't know. The thing about it is that I want what I know or what I think is really good because we're talking about something that's subjective.
Yeah.
And this is the part that really bothered me throughout the years, is that there will be people that I think are really good at their thing. And then once they started to get popular, the people who made, like, it's not cool to be in an underground and to like somebody that the average Joe Schmo could like. But I'm like, yo, isn't that kind of what we want? Don't we want the Roots to become so big that they're on late night television and an average person can understand how good Black Thought is? And I'm not saying like, okay, if the it's not like Black Thought went and had to like, he's spitting better rhymes today than he's ever spit, right? He didn't change. He didn't water himself down. But to say like, if you're somebody that like, if you're an underground dog, they're like, oh, the Roots is like, they're above ground now. I want to like this, I want to like that. And it's just like, yo, why can't we celebrate when the people that we know are good actually get success? And like, isn't that what we wanted? Don't we want like kick drummers to be like, yo, everybody knows, you know what I mean, what's going on? Like, don't we want that? Yeah. We want to be like, yo, give him $1 million. Like, that's our guy. That's who we champion. Why would we not do it? And it's like, it happens every time. So again, this falls back to that question of like, what do you want from this? Or I am one of those people that was like, yo, it's this guy and he's incredible. He's around tipping them. My other guy kind of like co-manages him. It's this JD kid. I want to know if it's real. So I bugged Beehive to be like, yo, Beehive was helping them, not managing them, but like helping them. Like, you know, your homeboy that's helping you get placements or helping you in the city, you know what I mean? Whatever. I was like, Beehive, give me a session with him. I'm not even going to charge them. I just want to see if it's real. Anytime I was like into a producer that much, I was like, I want to sit in the room and I want to see if it's real. Because it could be the homie in the basement. It could be like, you know, I've seen that a bunch of times. So the only session I ever did with Dilla was like a 3,000, a bunch of records, a bunch of weed, me and him. That's it. It's it. And I sat there and I got it. And I got like, why? I'm like, oh, okay. It's him. And he's not quantizing. And he turns the thing off. And he's like, he's not just doing let me grab the kick. He's doing like, let me grab the kick and the hi-hat and the air up until the next snare. Then he's grabbing the snare up. And so that's where you get some of this, like, it's airy but jerky, but like on his time. So I started to get it. Point being is that I wanted Dilla to blow up. I was going around town going like, yo, it's this guy. He's really good. He's really, 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 really good. And a lot of art, maybe Buster, you know what I mean, was one of the early ones that got onto him and always had him on a project. And you know what I mean, like those things. But he didn't get the like, to the point where everybody was calling him every day type status before he passed, right? So then when it gets to a point where like, okay, another generation comes in and you got these like Dilla Changed My Life t-shirts and you got people that are just like worshiping him and he's almost become like, almost like a James Dean to a certain degree, right? It's the people that were into him at first were like, oh, y'all just now jumping on it. If y'all was on it when he was here, he would have been rich. But I'm like, don't you want the kids to know Dilla? I want you to study Dilla. I want you to go into his catalog. I want you to download everything because he's that good. Yeah. So it's like I don't mind sharing the things that like that part. I hate that part of it. I hate the part of the like our underground people can't go above ground. If they change on you, then yeah. If an artist change up on you, then it's whatever. But I'm a champion certain people regardless, as long as they keep putting good stuff out, whether or not they're underground or. But matter of fact, it's kind of like my mission. The way I see it is like you're supposed to get paid because you're that good, and you do the thing I like.
A little biased.
Yeah, no. But I'm saying, like, no, if you do like that type of music, the type of music that I like, and I'm like, oh, okay, this is dope. I wish the whole world would see you. Like, there's a couple kids that I'm just like, and this is another thing I had to start recognizing in myself, where I was just like, I'm gonna start using my Instagram page for more than photography, because it's like the real reason my Instagram is that way is because I didn't want to, like, if you know, there's no party promotion on my Instagram. There's no, like, if I'm talking about a product, it's because I'm really using it. I don't accept like just, oh, let me just do this advertisement for this company. Like, if I'm talking about something, I really use it, yeah. and I really like it. Which is the reason why it's not a bunch of stuff up there. But it's also me recognizing like, oh, okay, or maybe start another Instagram. But there's the like Flo Bombers of the world and the people like that where I'm just like, yo, I need to be highlighting these people to everybody because everybody don't know. But I'll go to a show and watch, and I'm like, this is incredible. It's more than Stro Elliott, and you know what I'm saying? Like look at I've known Stro for a long time, and now that he's on the route, it's like, yeah, those people are supposed to get, but I want it to be 20 of those people, and then that becomes a thing, and then it's just like it's just not just Stro Elliott. Like, it's a lot of people that are out there killing that version of beat making, or like just the live programming, or what A-Rap Music does, or what, you know, and just the difference between all of those people that do the like physical, you know, stuff, yeah. I think that's an incredible part. Like, I'm just saying, highlight the people you like, and like don't leave them when they get a little bit of success.
I'm with that 100. Yeah, that's dope. Yeah. I'm looking.
More.
One person had, I guess, I don't think it's a real question, but they're talking about unleashing the flutes. And I think we've settled this as producers already. We already know those indeed were female choirs, right?
There's no flutes in the record, man.
Okay. No. Oh, man. No flutes in that record. I didn't think so. That's such a prolific sample. It's funny that people was like,
you know what I do wish though. Shout out to Charlemagne, the producer Charlemagne, not Charlemagne the God, but Charlemagne the God is cool too. But the producer Charlemagne who made that beat, and it's like he's had to deal with that like for years and years and years because Jay was like, unleash the flutes on them, Guru, and I'm like, first of all, you've shouted me out enough. I wish you would have said Charlemagne's name, but then second, it was just like there's no flutes, and I'm just like, all right. No,
we're gonna let it rap.
He's not changing. That's hilarious.
What are your feelings about I don't know, probably back in the day, probably more so, but what are your feelings about mixing in mono? I seen that one pop up 1,000 times.
The only time I know here's where the idea comes from, and a lot of it was originally television was mono, and there were certain places where you play music that was mono, elevators, and just like a bunch of places that would have one speaker. You know what I mean? Like more like public restaurants and things like that back in the day. But television itself was mono. So when you were and this is not like, I remember this is in my lifetime. This is not like, you know what I mean? Like this is a new thing. So I remember when at the bottom of NBC it would say in stereo, whatever, right?
Yeah.
That was one of the main reasons. So you would have to check if you had things that were sort of panned, in your mix, how that collapsed to mono. You would always have. So what most people would do is they have the R-tone in the middle of if you see old pictures, there's the old R-tone, the one speaker in the middle, and you check that. Or if you guys look at your ATR 102 plugin, what that really was in real life, that machine that recorded the half-inch tape had a little small speaker on it that was mono. And what you would normally do is like turn down, you'd be sitting at the board, that would be behind you way on the other side of the room. And I'd use that as a monitor.
Okay.
Now, in today's world, some of my EDM people argue that when they go to a concert, they want everything to be in the middle because they're playing out to a club. I mean, not to just to a club, but to a festival. So they want everything mono in the middle so that, like, if somebody has a seat that's way on the left or way on, everybody's hearing the same material. I've heard that argument before. I've never mixed mono. I check my mixes in mono. I'll check to see what they sound like collapsed to mono. But I've never mixed and like handed in a mono mix.
Well, I think what they're saying is there a benefit to starting in mono and mixing in the mono space and then switching to stereo at the end?
Not for me personally.
Okay.
I've never done that, but I would. That may be a question you maybe I could ask like one of my EDM guys that mix EDM, because I've had that conversation with them about why are you guys like their end result will be a mono, and they're like, I mix it that way because this is going out live. It's not to be sold. It's not for something that's going to be sold. It's literally to play out.
Got it. Yeah. That's dope. I think that's the only questions that I got from them that kind of stood out to me, man. But anything else going on?
I would be remiss if I don't talk about this and just give my opinion. I want to go on fact and on record to say that, like, I think it's some real crab mentality to sell sample packs and then try to charge people that use your sample packs and try to get money off the beat. Somebody in that discussion really bothered me, and it's no offense to those kids. The reason it really bothered me because somebody made a comment that was like, that's like Betty Crocker selling you the icing and charging you for the cake, like wanting a piece of the money from the cake that you sell. And it's just like, yo, like, come on. If you Betty Crocker and you say to me, this is for you to make icing, then that's it, fair exchange. So since somebody will argue and be like, yo, well, if you went and sampled a Marvin Gaye record, you're going to have to pay them. And I'm like, yeah, they didn't sell it to me under the guise. I'm talking about the false advertising.
Yes.
They didn't sell it to me under the guise of that. And they sold it to me. First of all, they're not selling it to me to sample. So when I go to sample it,
it's a privilege.
It's asking permission for something that you own, which can be any price. You can go anywhere from $0 to an infinite amount of money, and you can say no. It's your property. It's like if somebody came and said, yo, I need these headphones right now, and they're mine. I can do whatever I want, right? You're messing up the game when you do it under the guise of like, yo, I'm selling this sample pack, and then try to come. That's the way you get placements. Like that's a crab mentality. And what you're going to find is that if you Betty Crocker doing that, Duncan Hines ain't going to charge, and people just going to stop buying Betty Crocker. They're going to buy the Duncan Hines, and that's it. Or you also mess it up for the people that actually do that thing, right? For the people that go, okay, like there's a whole catalog of stuff that we can sample from, and you got to go through all this. You know what? I'm a musician. I'm going to sit down and I'm going to play a bunch of stuff, and this is for the purpose of you sampling this so that me and you can make new records. Sort of like you guys brought up Illmind doing that for other people. That's specifically so that me and you can make records. I'm supplying you with this. We're going into this as an agreement. That's why I said it's false advertisement. If I buy a regular pack, stop. You're going to charge me for the drum? This is what the guy from Tough City was doing. That pissed me off. You know what I'm saying? So it's just like, okay, then I'm just not going to use Impeach the President ever again. That's all you did. You made it so I'm never going to use what you got, ever. That's not the essence of what we do.
Right.
You know what I mean? And where does it stop? Like you're gonna try to charge me for a pattern now?
Right. That's what I was afraid of. It was going that way.
For a pattern. And I'm like, yo, a pattern? I didn't even touch your sound. I didn't even touch your property. Matter of fact, you can't. So if the kick goes on the 1 and the snare goes on the 2, that's somebody's intellectual property. You can't do that. You can't do that. And to get back to the point, I mean, that's just don't introduce that into the culture, yo. Like, please don't do that. Like, if put it in bold, I'm making these samples so that you can make these beats and we can split this pub, and you ain't got to deal with the record company. Don't sell it as a sample pack and then in fine print way at the end be like, yeah, and I get this much if you sell a beat. Are you crazy? No, you didn't bake the cake. You didn't bake the cake. You don't know how much sugar I put in here, how much flour, how much water.
Time.
I don't know none of that.
Right.
Besides the fact of I had to go sell the cake. There's a part of baking the cake and there's a part of selling the cake.
Yeah.
You didn't go out and did so dude that put up yeah, you didn't take the meeting. You didn't have to struggle. You didn't produce the record. You wasn't even the beat maker. If you want money, you can't be serious. Like don't do that. It's a slippery slope when you do that. Don't do that. Don't do that. I don't mean no disrespect to them dudes, man. I don't mean no disrespect, but like, don't do that. That's nasty.
It is. We'll see how that pans out, though. I think most people are polarized that way. A lot of people can see the nuance of it because they're thinking as a hustler or business person. But then the average person making beats, there's too many. Like you were saying about the Duncan Hines reference, there's so many Duncan Hines out there that it'll collapse on itself.
Let me give everybody the game, man. All these drum brokers and all these other people, go out and buy records and search for drum breaks. It's that simple, man. You got to put in a little bit of work. I know people want the instant gratification, so yes, I have all the drum packs just like everybody else. But where it come from is records. Learn drum breaks, and you have the greatest advantage. You could go on YouTube and be like drum breaks, and just learn the drum breaks. Like learn the records. What it does for you is this. This is the part of record digging that you miss. And like I said, there's positives and then negatives. The positives was we didn't know what the record was. I didn't grow up in a New York City environment. I grew up in Wilmington, Delaware. I didn't have a Roosevelt. I didn't have nobody around me that was telling me what the joints were. None of that. I had to literally go find them myself, which means I spent hours of logging music, listening, getting an experience, figuring out stuff just because I used to dig by covers. I like the cover. This looks funky. Blah, blah, blah. Now I have that logged in. I may go weeks without finding any drum, but I've listened to music and now I have that experience. Now I'm going to a record store. Guess what? Naturally in that record store, it's going to be some old person that's going to be like, why are you in this section? Why not over there? The new latest whatever. And they're going to strike a conversation with you. You're going to get some wisdom from that person. They're going to hip you to all the things that's outside of your music sphere that they know about. And they're going to tell you a bunch of stuff. This is what the record digging experience does. It matures you. It gives you, it's way more than just like, I need the kick and the snare.
Right.
Like you start to learn, that's why that part of it, I really wish that was still there. Or like when you're doing these things, like take the time to really go find out what the source was. Because when you see people like the Dilla drum pack and the Just Blaze drum pack and the Ninth Wonder drum pack, you know what they drum packs was? Records.
Right.
Records. They found an ill drum break and they studied it to find out which ones are which. This is why I put up those lists where it's like, yeah, I could put up a list and I could even give you a folder that has the drum break, that has the 12 seconds, the 4 seconds, or however long it was. But I would like you to go listen to the record, right? If you like, go listen to it. Like I said that on one of the videos that I was doing about digging, where it was just like, if you just get Big Beat, you know, just use Big Beat, Billy Squier Big Beat, one of the most popular breaks ever. If you just get that and not the record, then you're not going to listen and know that there's another breakbeat on it. And you're not going to hear, you know what I mean? And it may be stuff to sample on there. And then you can start studying arrangements and you can start studying all these things that make you a great producer. Like those, you gotta hear it first, or you won't make stupid statements and being like, I'm the one who created this. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. So-and-so did it first.
Yeah.
You lose some of that, you know what I mean? Like, I've had kids come up to me and just be like, oh, well, we arguing about who's the best MC or music or da-da-da-da. And they're like, oh, well, Nas is the first person to write from the perspective of a bullet. And I'm like, no, he's not. Organized Confusion did that first. You just never heard that record.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? When you start to make these statements that ain't really like, it's like that with everything. My overall point is like, listen to a lot of music. Go outside of your sphere. Get the KCRW app and listen to Eclectic in the Morning. Like, listen to, it's like, you'll be like, oh my God, this is dope. What is this? Like, this ain't corny. It's somebody I don't know. This is like incredible. Like, do all of that. I listen to like, yeah, KCRW is my biggest one. Radio is a real good app. I don't know if y'all got Radio. It's like radio with all the O's at the end. We can pick music from different time periods and different places. I don't know. Those are like those. I don't get everything away, but like those are like the main ones that it's just for me to listen to music, like and to be. People be surprised that I don't really listen to a lot of hip hop music.
Yeah.
When I get time for pleasure, I'm probably listening to reggae or maybe Dilla beats or like, you know what I mean? Like I'm not really like, because I have to listen to it all the time for work and I have to do it in the club and I have to do it all the time. Like for pleasure, I'm listening to older songs. I'm probably in my slide. I go through phases, but it's like music. You go through phases. I'm slide Family Stone. I'm Ohio Players one day, and then I'm, in Brazil the next day. You know what I mean? Like listening to that, or I'm listening to something from South Africa, or prog rock is a big thing for me. You know what I mean? Like progressive rock is incredible. Especially like stuff from like Russia and like it's a lot of incredible music. Right? Africa alone is just like incredible right now. It's more than just listening to hip hop. That will make your hip hop better.
Right, facts. Facts. I was about to say that. Yeah. You'd be able to mix everything in a bowl in your subconscious, and then it starts leaking out into new ideas.
It's all colors. It's all colors. You know what I mean? It ain't but really three things, but it's like, what's the shade? Seriously, we make our combination off of three. It's really
three primaries. Yeah.
And then we make the combinations of, look how much stuff we can make based off those three things.
Amazing. Facts. That's it, man. That's all we got, man. How can people follow you, get in contact with you? A lot of people trying to call you out for saying, "I'll just send you the breaks." So how can people get in contact with you?
Young Guru. People think I'm lying. I will. Okay. You know what? I'm gonna make a post and put it up.
There we go. Yeah. What's your Twitter?
My Twitter is young_guru. Instagram is youngguru763.
Perfect. Well, man, I appreciate you, man. This was very inspiring, and I'm sure it's inspired a lot of these people and shocked a lot of people. But I just want to thank you for taking your downtime to spend any time with me or us in that matter. So I appreciate you, brother.
Absolutely. It's important, man. It's definitely important. We got the tools now to like, people can communicate with each other. I think it's a really dope thing. So like, you have a specific community, you do something really well, which I appreciate, which is just like being able to explain plugins. And it helps people like me who and I just preached about reading the manual, but like if I'm in that time where I can't, or, I'm on the road, I appreciate what you do in terms of breaking down plugins, breaking down approach, the reverse engineering, all those things. So that's, for me, it's nothing. I could talk shop all day.
All right. Well, thank you. I'm going to go ahead and end the stream, guys. Thanks for everyone who joined in. A lot of people are saying thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Like I said, I'm going to the stream. It'll save. It'll render on YouTube and be available, and we'll be able to share it on social. I appreciate all you guys. Thank you again, guys. Peace.
Peace.